How you doing, Solicitor?
I'm good, Council President. How are you?
Never had a bad day in my life.
Well, that's always good to hear.
Now you know this.
Channel 64 isn't on yet. Council President, we don't have bad days. We have days of opportunity. That's what we should call them.
Okay, I like that.
Okay,
Some of those
CP,
days have lots of.
Sorry. Okay, Council President, committee members, and participants, we are live.
Thank you. Thank you all, and good morning to all. We're going to get started. This hearing is called to order. I recognize the presence of a quorum of the committee members. This is the public hearing of the Committee of the Whole regarding bills number 230-144, 230-145, 230-146, 230-147, 230-148, 230-149, and resolution number 230-162. Mr. McDermott, will you please read the titles of the bills and resolution?
Bill number 230-144, an ordinance to adopt a capital program for the 6 fiscal years 2024 to 2029 inclusive. Bill number 230-145, an ordinance to amend to adopt a fiscal 2024 capital budget. Bill number 230-146, an ordinance adopting the operating budget for fiscal year 2024. Bill number 230-147, an ordinance amending Chapter 19-1500 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Wage and Net Profits Taxes by revising certain tax rates under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 230-148, an ordinance amending Chapter 19-2800 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Pennsylvania Intergovernmental Cooperation Authority Tax on Wages and Net Profits to provide for the continuation of the tax and to make other conforming changes, all under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 230-149, an ordinance amending Chapter 19-2600 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Business Income and Receipts Tax by revising certain tax rates under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 230-162, providing for the approval of the Council of the City of Philadelphia, a revised 5-year financial plan for the City of Philadelphia, covering fiscal years 2024 through 2028 and incorporating revised changes with respects to fiscal year 2023, which is to be submitted by the mayor to the Pennsylvania Intergovernmental Cooperation Authority pursuant to the Intergovernmental Cooperation Agreement authorized by an ordinance of this council, approved by the mayor on January 3rd, 1992, by and between the city and the authority.
Thank you very much, Mr. McDermott. Today, we continue the public hearing of the Committee of the Whole to consider the bills read by the clerk that constitute proposed operating and capital spending measures for fiscal 2024, a capital program, and a forward-looking capital plan for fiscal 2024 through fiscal year 2029. This morning, we will hear testimony from the Law Department and the District Attorney's Office. This afternoon, we will hear from the Sheriff's Department and the First Judicial District. Mr. McDermott, the first person to testify this morning is?
First person to testify is Diana Cortez, City Solicitor. And before I do that, Council President, I do have to take the roll.
Okay.
For today's hearing.
Let's take the roll.
Councilmember Bass. Councilmember Brooks. Councilmember Driscoll.
Present.
Present. Councilmember Gautier.
Present.
Councilmember Gilmore Richardson.
Good morning, Council President and colleagues. I am present.
Councilmember Harity.
I am present. Good morning, council member.
Good morning.
Councilmember Johnson. Councilmember Jones. Councilmember Lozada.
Good morning, everyone. I'm present.
Councilmember O'Neill.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Councilmember Phillips.
Good morning, everyone. I'm present.
Good morning.
Councilmember Squilla.
Good morning, Council President and colleagues present.
Good morning.
Councilmember Thomas. And
Morning,
Councilmember Vaughn.
Oh, I'm here. I'm present.
Oh.
Give me that. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
and Councilmember Vaughn. Okay, thank you, Council President. And the first witness to testify is Diana Cortez, City Solicitor.
Thank you very much, and good morning, Madam Solicitor.
Good morning, Council President. Good morning, buenos dias a todos, to Council President and members of City Council. As you heard, I am Diana Cortez, the City Solicitor. Joining me today virtually are Kristen Bray, our First Deputy City Solicitor, David Torres, Director of Administration, Renee Garcia, Chair of Litigation, Valerie Robinson, Corporate Chair, Nicolette Burgess Bolden, Chair of Social Services, Andrew Richmond, our Chief of Staff, Tiana Kalogerakis, our Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Professional Development, and Francis Beckley, our Chief Deputy City Solicitor of Tax and Revenue Unit. I'm pleased to provide testimony on the Law Department's fiscal year 2024 operating budget. Continued investment in the current and future legal and DEI development of the Law Department will cause the city to reap great rewards. As this City Council knows, the Law Department's work touches every part of the lives of this great city's residents. From our supporting contracts and real estate transactions that allow public parks and playgrounds to be built, to initiating litigation to improve quality of life and reducing gun violence, to protecting our most vulnerable children and ensuring they have room to grow, thrive, and be the future of Philadelphia. Law's work is integral to ensuring the future success of our city. As City Solicitor, I'm requesting the following budget testimony, which was submitted to all of you. I won't go into it all right now, but you all have it in front of you. The following fiscal year 24 budget as a necessary investment in our Law Department, which comprises of 330 plus attorneys, professional staff, all who have dedicated their professional careers like yourselves to public service, and particularly serving the city in which they reside and love. As you will hear below, Law continues to invest in DEI. For example, Mansfield Certification Plus, we incorporate DEI questions in all of our interviews, and we this year for the first time have incorporated DEI assessments and performance evaluations as a key competency area of our practice. I, along with the Law Department, have the esteemed honor and pleasure of serving all of you and our city stakeholders in equitably and creatively resolving and addressing the city's legal issues. This commitment to investing in law staff is crucial to our retention, along with our ability to hire the best and brightest legal minds, which we need as we work together to solve some of the city's most complicated and compelling issues. So I will stop right there in case there are any questions for me or my department.
Thank you, Madam Solicitor. Got a couple of questions before I turn it over to my colleagues. I want to get into something that I talk about. I think I bring it up pretty much every year. The Indemnities Fund, as it relates to these cases that we seem to more frequently have to interact with members of whatever organization that figures out a way to sue us. I've always questioned and voiced some concerns about the appearance of us always settling cases, and I may be wrong because I don't follow it that closely, but I guess the settlement tends to get more attention in the press and other places. And I guess my question is, would it make more sense to put more resources and not necessarily settlement, but take these cases to court? Because some of them, like I was involved in some minor incident with a car once before, and I didn't agree with the settlement, but, people say, well, let's settle it. It's not a big deal. But, I clearly, from my perspective, was in the right? So it's like, why are we settling this case, right? But anyway, on a much larger note, am I wrong, or the overwhelming majority of the cases settled? And I'm assuming that the concern is the court ruling and the judgment issued by the courts would be much larger than us taking the case. And does that send a signal to anyone that all we have to do is sue, the city will settle because there's no chance of us leaving? I know that was a long question, but it's a very leading question.
Right.
Yeah, can you Talk to me about that.
Just give some
briefly.
insight into that. Sure, anytime, Council President, and thank you for your question. And, as to how we're spending these different funds. So one thing that does not get, for whatever reason, publicized in the press is how many times we are actually in court winning. We don't get any press coverage on, all these different trials that we have. A number of our attorneys in particular in our civil rights unit, our torts litigation unit, our employment unit as well. They're in trial often and they're winning. They're winning because you don't hear about it. You would hear when we didn't win and it was a big judgment. So I think that that's sort of a misnomer. You do hear about the different settlements that are larger. And in some cases, it's a matter of how much is it going to cost the city to put this case on versus what is this particular plaintiff trying to get. In some cases, even if we do lose, we end up getting a smaller result, a smaller verdict against us than what the initial demand was. So I think first, we do take cases to trial. I think I've shared with you and others here in City Council that we love to go to court. I love to go to court. I don't get to do it as much as I used to, but we have fun fighting for this city. So we definitely do go to court. And I think it's a matter, if there's a concern of how much we are spending from our indemnities fund, I would submit that, again, going back to the theme of investment, if there are more investment for more attorneys, then I think there would be a lesser caseload per attorney, and therefore there would be even more possibilities for some of these attorneys to take on these cases and take them fully to trial. Because in some instances, some of these attorneys are carrying a very large caseload and they cannot actually go to trial on every single case. But we definitely do go to trial often. And I'd be more than happy to share with you and any other council member who's interested more of a detailed analysis on that and the actual verdicts and things like that.
Yeah, that would be helpful if you can give us a sense so we can understand the percentages of cases
Sure.
tried versus cases settled. As you indicated, it appears to be much more significant number on the tried and versus the settlement. And then as we do an analysis, because I know every department always and every entity in the city always wants more resources, and it may make sense to address the resource side of it if we're in a much better position as it relates to the judicial process. I just noticed ever since I've been there, every year the indemnities fund just keeps climbing, and
well, actually, yeah, but just to clarify, I think for our indemnities fund, to my understanding, has stayed the same. I think this was the first year in which it had been raised quite a bit, and I think that was more so for these overturned conviction cases that we have now. So those are costing more to resolve, but all those other cases we have definitely been taking to trial. And prevailing in those. And on top of taking cases and winning at trial, we have great attorneys who are also great writers, and they are able to convince the judge to dismiss cases with prejudice flat out. And so again, those don't get the limelight as much as we would like to, or actually at all. And again, it would be our pleasure to provide that analysis to you, and again, any other council member that's interested.
That would be helpful. Thank you. This other issue in your budget testimony, in your FY2024 proposal, you talk about new funding for third-party appraisers and expert witnesses to support the defense of real estate tax assessments. That's obviously always a touchy subject matter as it relates to real estate and people appealing the OPA's assessment. Talk to me about how that works and why are we doing that now? Is it that OPA is not currently in a position to justify its assessment, or what's going on that we require to have the law department engaged with some additional resources?
Sure. And I think for that question, and she was in my mind, I'm going to defer to our Chief Deputy of Tax and Revenue Unit, Frances Beckley, to go into more detail.
Good morning, Revenue Chief Counsel Frances Beckley, BECKLEY. We have, because of the 2023 assessments, a record number of very large and complex assessment appeals. We have appeals from 28 properties that are worth over 100 million and over 220 appeals from properties that are worth over 10 million. The law department has had the foresight to provide me with additional funds to give raises to the real estate tax attorneys who will be defending those cases in common pleas. And for example, I'm very pleased, one of our best mid-level litigators chose to stay with us due to a promotion that was given to me for him, despite being offered $20,000 more in salary by the IRS. And I can promise you that in the next year, he will save tax revenue many, many times the value of the promotion we gave him. It's inevitable that when there is a countywide reassessment, there are a large number of assessment appeals. And the law department, I think, has done a great job of putting us in a good position to defend those. The appraisers are the expert witnesses who testify as to the value of the buildings. And without good appraisers, we could not defend those values. And one of the things that is most positive is one of our best appraisers that we use the most recently retired. The gentleman who took that over is a minority gentleman, so that large contract is now part of our minority participation. And appraisers is one of the areas where we had a hard time recruiting diverse vendors, so we're particularly pleased with that outcome.
Okay, and I'm assuming this will not be an ongoing entity, increase in funding or more resources, and we anticipate not having such a large, overly aggressive assessment process, particularly given this year we're not even doing an assessment process. Just like a one-time thing.
I think OPA has faced all the challenges of the pandemic and of putting in its new CAMA system. And I think if they are able, as they hope, from 25 onward to do an assessment every year, then the adjustments will be more reasonable and we can anticipate that there will be less litigation.
Okay. Less requests for additional money.
That would be, and more steady tax revenue coming in.
All right, cool. All right, I'll come back on the next round. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Gauthier.
Thank you, Council President. Before I ask my questions, I just want to again express my appreciation for all of the work the law department does to keep the city safe and running smoothly under the fierce and dynamic leadership of Solicitor Cortez. My office truly appreciates you and your entire team, and we're very proud of the way that you represent us.
Thank you so much, Councilmember.
You're welcome. Moving on to comments and questions, the law department plays a very crucial role in remedying quality of life issues like illegal dumping and cracking down on nuisance businesses. This is why it's important that we prioritize allocating the resources the law department needs to take on these cases on a bigger scale. I want to continue my line of questions from yesterday and dive into the role that the law department plays in enforcing code violations. Knowing that around 30% of all L&I cases end up in court, can you describe the role that the law department's code enforcement unit plays in holding code violators accountable?
Yes, thank you for that question, Councilmember. I'm going to defer to our current First Deputy, Kristen Bray, who before that was the chief of our code and public nuisance litigation unit.
Good morning, City Council members, and good morning, Councilmember Gauthier.
The city law department plays an integral role in bringing code enforcement cases to court. You've noted a couple of the different programs that our code enforcement unit is involved with, such as short dumping. In each of those cases, the law department files a case either in the municipal court or the court of common pleas, seeking compliance of the code violations. From individuals who are not willing to comply with those violations, the law department also seeks the imposition of fines and penalties. In addition, the law department can seek equitable remedies from a business or from a building owner that is not complying with the code. Those cases are fairly extensive, especially when we're dealing with individuals who are preying upon low-income tenants and ensuring that they have an excellent quality of life, or they're helpful in solving these issues that plague our neighborhoods, like ensuring that short dumpers are brought into compliance with the law and ensuring that they pay back the damages that they have caused for the city. They are also integral in helping the police department and license and inspections, ensuring that illegal businesses such as speakeasies and in other locations where they're selling drug paraphernalia, which we believe proliferates violence, that no longer happens so that our neighborhoods are safe and healthy for everyone.
Thank you so much for outlining that critical role. In your estimation, does a code enforcement unit presently staff enough attorneys to keep up with the large volume of code violations for these quality of life issues? And if not, what does law need in terms of staffing and budget to better keep up with the volume?
Well, I'll answer it generally, and then I think if Kristen, based on her prior experience, has anything else, I would invite her to chime in. I think, as we initially said, resources are always welcome. And I think the more resources you invest, the greater the return. So I think we would welcome that, but I think we would also defer to City Council working that out with the finance department as to how that proposed allocation works with all the other allocations and all the other needs and demands of the city. So that's sort of all is always welcome, but I think again, it's a matter of where is it that you all want to invest in to as compared to what you're not fully investing in other areas.
Thank you. I appreciate that, but I'm also looking to get down to brass tacks. So I want to know how many staff you currently have taking on these cases, and how do you feel that staff meets the amount of, is able to handle the amount of cases that come your way, and what might a better staff or a bigger staff complement look like?
Yeah, I think Kristen has the specific caseloads, I think, of our current unit. And so I will defer to her.
So we have approximately 15 attorneys in that unit. 3 of them are a supervisory role. As you divide out the caseload per attorney, and not every case is created equal. Some are much easier to bring to trial and get a result, and some are much more complicated and need a lot of working with L&I, Health Department, and our other partners to make sure we're getting the right result for the city. But currently, the average attorney in the code enforcement unit carries about 261 cases, which is a pretty significant number.
And in your estimation, would you want these attorneys to have less of a caseload if we're truly going to make traction on these persistent neighborhood issues?
I think we
and
would.
What might that look like?
So I'll answer the first part, and then if you can clarify what do you mean, what that would look like. I think it's a no-brainer for everybody in the city. The more resources you invest in it, the lower the caseload, the smaller the portfolio, and I think the more attention each person can place on everything in front of them. So I think the results ultimately would be better, and I think that each individual person would feel, I think, just better in general outside of their professional workforce. So I think that would definitely be welcome. But I think the same thing can be said about all the different departments and everything that they're obligated to do for the city.
Absolutely. So what might, if 661 cases per attorney is not an ideal caseload, what is a better caseload, and what would that mean in terms of growing the staff?
I think, as Kristen noted, every case is a little different. So I think we appreciate, council member, you're going into brass tacks. And so if it's okay, I think what we would want to do is get back to you on that, just so that we could do a better breakdown of, what exactly comprises these 261, right? As to like what board they're in front of, what tribunal. And so that way our answer can be more geared and more specific to your particular ask, if that's okay.
Thank you. I'll look out for that information. And my last question is, can you describe the law department's role on the nuisance task force?
I think I'll defer to Kristen on that one as well.
Thanks, Diana. So the nuisance task force was something created within, and we call it the nuisance business committee, not a task force, was something created by the law department to have our clients work in a cooperative fashion together. Oftentimes before I was the chief, you would see individual operating departments work and have an enforcement action of one particular operating department and then a different enforcement of a different operating department. And some very clever individuals would then play the two operating departments against each other. So the purpose of the nuisance business committee is to ensure that the departments are working together and best utilizing their resources. It also helps us collaborate and cooperate with our partners at the state level, who often have enforcement capabilities around us. And at the end of the day, we are seeing that those efforts are resulting in better, clearer, more consistent enforcement, because we do have businesses that have a right and really want to know how can they best comply with the law. And to the extent that we can focus our resources on the individuals who are not going to be cooperative partners with the community that they're in, that ends up with better results for everyone within the city.
Thank you. And as a follow-up, I know my time is up. I would just ask, is that work resourced? How is that work resourced? And are you keeping up with capacity? And how ideally would that work be resourced in order for you to do the best job for the city?
That is work that the unit does as part and parcel of all of its other enforcement responsibilities. And I think, as Solicitor Cortez has said, we're happy to get you more specific, granular details as to what would be most helpful.
Thank you. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Gilmore Richardson.
All right. Thank you, Council President. Thank you very much. And thank you to our Madam Solicitor, Diana Cortez, for all of your work and for your partnership over the last several years. We've been able to work very, very closely together, and I certainly appreciate the work of you and your department. And I just have to mention a few folks that have worked with us on literally a month-by-month, week-by-week basis over the last couple of years. So, of course, Kristen Bray and everyone on the Nuisance Business Committee, thank you, thank you, thank you. Louis Rossman, who I worked with early in my career as a legislative aide here in Council, Renee Garcia, Raynell Stanley, Fran Beckley, Jane Ispan, Carol Henney, and I have to remember Pat O'Neill. Just truly appreciate the good work that he did in the law department. I will continue in the line of questioning that I had relative to enforcement against nuisance businesses. You know that we all have worked very closely together after the passage of my drug paraphernalia bill to really look at enforcement around these businesses that are setting up in our communities without the proper zoning and or licensing to operate in the community. And I heard my colleague, Councilmember Gaudier, asking questions regarding the Nuisance Business Committee, but I want to double down on the last question she asked, because last budget cycle, I asked each department that has a role within the nuisance business committee to tell us what Class 100 funds would help you to be most successful in ensuring that we can really increase the amount of cases we are able to deal with as a city. You know that it's very difficult to sort of get through the process after, first inspection, second inspection, third inspection, meeting with the business owners. And, we've even done that even recently with some businesses that we are trying to work to help get into compliance. But if you had ideal circumstances, particularly with, and I'm sure we'll hear about this more on the 11th with the neighborhood services unit with PPD, how many additional attorneys and or paralegals and clerks do you think it would be necessary to ensure that we can adequately work within the confines of the nuisance business committee and with health and with PPD and with commerce and the other departments that we work with to perform these enforcement actions?
Thank you so much for that question, Councilmember Gilmore Richardson. And as always, thank you for your support and partnership throughout these years. I think for that question, I would want us to get back to you on that because I think it's similar to Councilmember Gautier's question. I think we want to better get a sense as to the individual caseloads for our attorneys right now, but also another piece of this is it's not just our attorneys filing these cases. That's just one part of it. It's also a matter of like, what does this individual case look like? So do we have sufficient inspectors to basically provide the record for a strong record for our attorneys to move in? Have we prepared them? Do we have enough time to, prep them for court? Is all the evidence we have going to be admissible? So I think there's all these other pieces before, throwing us into the courtroom, which again, we love doing. But we want to make sure that we have sufficient resources in those, from LNI and others. And I think the Commerce Department as well. I don't know to what extent, but I would want us just to take the time to coordinate with them just to make sure that whatever we put forward is going to succeed on all basis.
Okay, well, we'll certainly follow up with you about that because I know we had asked each of the coordinating departments last year what it would take to sort of really beef up the work of the committee so that you are able to address more nuisance business cases, recognizing that we have this proliferation of stores that are selling drug paraphernalia who do not have this the approval from the city in order to do so. So we'll certainly follow up there. I mentioned Pat O'Neill and really, really miss him so much because of the great work that he did. Have you found a replacement for him or have you hired in that position? What's the status of that work in the law department?
Yes. So I think, as we all know, there's never going to be a full replacement of Pat O'Neill.
Never.
Never. But we did hire Visha Patel in our is now in that role. And so she's been doing an amazing job in attempting to fill in his shoes, but also just really diving into all the different issues and has been providing critical advice to the health department, AMS, and all of the other clients. So if you have not met her, I will make sure that we do an introductory meeting for you and for her.
Okay, that'll be great. And to your point, how many attorneys currently work in the environmental law unit?
I think right now there are currently 3.
Okay, so 3 attorneys are in the environmental law unit. Do any of them have any level of specialty and or experience around environmental justice?
I would have to get back to you with that, but any type of environmental justice, affirmative litigation, there would be a cross-departmental or cross-unit effort between that unit and our regulatory unit, which is now headed by Ji Jun, and we would then team up with our affirmative litigation unit, which is headed by Ben Field, and his unit has led the efforts on, we filed an affirmative litigation regarding PFAS. We were able
Right.
to, with opioids, we were able to get significant settlement money through that has already started coming into the city. So again, as this is a theme forever, that we love going into court, we love fighting, we love getting results for the city. So environmental justice is just another area that I think we need to really fully invest in more. And so we're open to your ideas or to anybody else from City Council who may have ideas on this.
Sure. I just wanted to mention, and you already mentioned two of the themes that I wanted to bring up and ask you all about today. But is the environmental law unit, are they working with the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection or the EPA to really understand some of these emerging legal questions in the environmental justice conversations, particularly around cumulative impacts? And I hear the bell, but I ask that question because, I serve on the local government advisory committee for the US EPA, and this has been a real emerging question relative to how they are advising municipalities to deal with cumulative impacts. And I wanted to ensure that we are at least doing that work and or cross collaborating with our partners, either from the state or from the federal level, to sort of understand some of the emerging legal questions in these environmental justice conversations, but specifically focusing on cumulative impact. And then you also mentioned that the PFAS lawsuit, and it's my understanding, is the city leading the PFAS lawsuit? Are there any other plaintiffs, and how are you all working with the water department or any of the other environmental experts around that case?
Yes. So before we filed the PFAS litigation, there was a significant amount of time collaborating with the water department, with the airport, and other affected clients. And I don't want to go into too much detail because I don't want to disclose any type of legal strategy or privilege. But again, happy to set up an offline conversation to go into more of those details. Regarding your question as to in the environmental group, both our current chief of regulatory and one of our other attorneys, India McGee, and also Sean McGrath, who is in our affirmative litigation group, they are going to several environmental justice conferences. So they are establishing themselves and their networks within this particular area of expertise, and also gaining that additional knowledge and insight as to where else we can go, what other actions we can bring forth on behalf of the city.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you, Council President. And I will certainly follow up with you, Madam Solicitor, to ensure you have the latest information around the cumulative impact part of the conversation. We're going to have another meeting with EPA in about a month or so, but it'll be important for the city because there will be opportunity for us to bring revenue into the city that would not only help from a law department perspective, but help some of our other departments in providing service and additional investment in communities. So thank you very much. I will submit the balance of my questions for the record. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Council Lady. Chair recognizes Councilman Thomas.
Good morning, Council President. Good morning, Cortez. I just, first of all, want to say thank you to you and your entire team. I don't want to start naming folks because I know I'm going to miss somebody. But it's no secret that when I first got into City Council, I was very skeptical as it relates to the relationship between City Council and the Solicitor's Office, primarily because you represent us and the administration. But I can honestly say that I felt like you've done an amazing job, Solicitor Cortez, as it relates to that balance. You have a very good team, and unfortunately, I've worked with you on a number of different things and still working with you as it relates to lawsuits dealing with issues with the city of Philadelphia. So just wanted to get that out the way first. Two things
Thank you very much, Council Member.
Oh, anytime, so it's an honor. Two things I want to discuss with you during my 5 minutes or so. I do want to talk a little bit about driving equality, and I also want to talk about what's going on with our facilities. Let's start with driving equality. Recently, the courts decided to, of course, rule in our favor, which we were very optimistic about, didn't surprise us. How much and you might not know this off the top of your head, but if you can give me an approximation, how much manpower was spent on defending driving equality? Is there a way we could determine how much it cost the city of Philadelphia to defend that legislation in court? I know it wasn't just you and your team. We had outside counsel as well, too. Is there a way you can give us an estimate on what that number was?
I don't have the invoices submitted by Keir Bradford Gray, who we retained as outside counsel for this, but I can get so I can add that invoice up to the amount of hours we spent as a department working with her and collaborating with her and drafting the paper. So I would have to get back to you on that.
Yeah, at some point, if you can get back to my team, and I know you work with my folks often, and just let us know. It's important that we recognize that this was preventable. And this is an example of government waste, taxpayer dollars being, put in a position where we're not addressing important quality of life stuff. So please get us that number. Again, we appreciate your work on that. Let's transition to the school district. Right now, myself as the education chair, as well as you and your team and other members of council, we've been working diligently to try to put us in a position to address some of the issues that we're seeing as it relates to our facilities. Looking at where we are right now, can you talk to us a little bit about the legal standing of the lawsuit from the school district of Philadelphia? I know you can't go in depth to the point where as though it would create a conflict within the case, but based on what you are allowed to share, can you talk to us about where we are and what you anticipate happening in the near future?
Sure. So because we're in this litigation and I'm not going to disclose any privileged or attorney work product, I'll go with what's been available in the public docket. So right now, the city has filed a motion to dismiss this particular lawsuit, alleging that the ordinance is preempted by federal law. We can also submit to you, or I think resubmit to you, a copy of, and anyone else who is interested, a copy of our motion to dismiss, which we maintain it as a very strong motion. The judge also ordered the parties to engage in mediation, which is being handled by Mark Aronchik. So we have different scheduled meetings regarding this mediation. And so right now we're in that process. During the mediation process, interveners, including a number of parents, along with the parent organization, have filed an intervention motion, meaning that they want to be part of this lawsuit. And I think also Penn Environmental was part of that motion to intervene. That motion is currently pending before the district court, and the judge is Judge Wendy Beetlestone. The school district has opposed that motion to intervene, saying that they don't have a basis to come into this lawsuit, that the city is addressing their interests, and so there's no need for these interveners to come in. And right now, those motions are pending before the court. We don't know when she will decide to rule on them. However, we feel very strongly on our motion that if she were to rule on them, she would rule in our favor.
And from your expert opinion, do you feel like there was another way this issue could have been handled besides going to court? Is there what would have been possible for us to negotiate this outside of court?
Council members, I can give you my expert opinion, but I can't do that in public. So I can give you an expert opinion offline as a privileged conversation. But, I think a number of lawsuits in our society could be avoided if people sat down and talked with each other ahead of time. But I'm happy to give you my expert opinion offline and in a privileged setting.
Okay. Well, what about the financial side? Similar to what we asked in driving equality. How much is this lawsuit costing the city of Philadelphia and the taxpayers, at least just on the city end? Because I'm sure that the district is spending a good amount of money to on their legal side as well too. It's a lot of money being spent of taxpayer dollars on this particular issue, when I'm in a position to believe that this could have been resolved without litigation and the legal matters that we're facing. So do we have an idea of an approximate of how much we're spending on this lawsuit?
On the school district asbestos lawsuit,
Yes.
I will have to check to see what the status of those invoices are. I don't think we get to see those particular invoices. I will check on that. So we are the law department is representing the city in this matter, so we did not have to retain outside counsel with that. The mediator, who is Mark Aronchek, the parties do have to pay. Oh, I'm sorry. We do have outside counsel. We have Dilworth assisting us with that representation on the school district. So I don't have their invoices in front of me, but once I get those, I can definitely share those with you. Oh,
Yeah, please.
We have at least to date 17,000 billed through February.
Wait, say that number again.
17,017 billed through February. So we're now in April, so that's not including March.
Okay, thank you. And if you can get us those final numbers, my team, I think it's important that we recognize that, sometimes we can put ourselves in a position where these things could be addressed without going through the legal matters that we're actually going through right now. And I think that it's important that we start to put the dollar amount on how much this stuff is costing the taxpayers and the citizens of Philadelphia, so we could begin to try to rectify some of these issues without going through the steps that we're going through right now. So again, Solicitor Cortez, thank you so much. Thank you and your entire team. I'll be sure to make sure we follow up to get some of these answers in writing. And we look forward to continuing to work with you to make Philadelphia a better place. That's it, Council President.
Thank you, Councilmember Thomas.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Lozada.
Thank you, Council President. Good morning. Thank you, Diana, again for all you do and for providing me guidance since I've been here. I appreciate you and all of your team as well. So I'm sure that you know that there's been a lot of conversation about safe injection sites in different communities. And just recently, the DOJ met with a group of community residents from Kensington and Harrogate and walked away, a little frustrated about the lack of information or the mixed information that they've received. As representatives of the community, we were not allowed to participate in the meeting, but the concerns were that there is this, I want to say, I guess people walked away with the assumption that there are going to be safe injection sites throughout the city. And we were not able, or we, as the representatives, are not able to provide clarity to them. Is there anything that you can share with us that will allow us to better inform the community about whether we're getting one for every district, whether they're not coming, a decision is not made? What do we say to people? Because there's not one meeting that I attend on a weekly basis where community residents are asking about safe injection sites and whether they're coming to the community or not. What can you tell us about that litigation?
Sure. So, Councilmember Lozada, thank you for that question and your representation of your district and the people of Philadelphia. I think what I would say is I would want to invite you or any other council member who is interested in this issue. We can have a discussion to see, and you too, I see you, Councilmember Harity. We can set up a sort of a feedback session as to where are we missing, where's the disconnect? Because it's my understanding that there have been different community meetings on these issues. So I'd be more than happy for us to have a conversation on that as to where can there be improvements on this. And so we can definitely work with the managing director's office in particular, because I think it's my understanding they have been leading these discussions with other community partners. So again, I want to make sure everyone has the correct information and not be led by misinformation. So I'd be happy to do that.
I think that what is happening, just so that you know, and I appreciate your willingness to want to meet with us. I'm happy to do that. I'm sure that Councilman Harity and Councilwoman Vaughn, who are also council people who live in the 7th Council District, will share my sentiments when I say that, you know, we're always talking in circles. And that seems to be the problem. There's never a, yes, they're coming and we need to prepare. We need to be a part of where they're going to go. Or no, they're not coming. Everybody needs to settle down and we're going to figure this out. And we're far from making a decision, right? And so the community needs very clear answers without all of the gray areas that oftentimes they're given. And so we need to figure it out. I want to know if a safe injection site is coming to the 7th Council District. As the person that was elected to represent people, I should be the first person to know and not the last person to know. I shouldn't find out with the community. I should find out first so that then I can be better prepared to help with whatever is going to be required to keep the community settled down. These people have been dealing with this, and you know this very well, for over 20 years. And so I think that it is unfair for us to continue to have them on this wild goose chase of whether they're coming or they're not. And we are under the impression that we're very close to a decision being made. And so I'd appreciate whatever you can tell us, whatever you can give us. And
I'm just a little bit at a loss sort of where that was the conclusion. All I offered was for us to have a conversation again to better understand where the disconnect was. And then therefore for us to work together as to how best to, I think, inform the public, because again, there's a lot of misinformation out there on a number of things. And what I will share with you is that sort of the initial parts of your question, I think is part of it did have some misinformation. So again, I think it's best for us to discuss, and it's not just with me, because again, I'm the attorney, I'm not the deciding client department. So I would want the, members of the administration, in particular managing director's office, public health, to be part of this conversation with you, Councilmember Harity, and anyone else in city council who wants to, have more of this information. So I think I'm happy for us to schedule that. In fact, I can try to see if we can schedule this while I'm talking right now, so other folks can start reaching out to your respective offices, along with the managing director's office.
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Good, Councilwoman?
Yes, thank you, Council President.
Good. Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilman Thomas. Oh, hold on, Councilman. Councilman Harity, did you have a point of information, or I saw your hand raised, or were you just keen?
No, I was trying to applaud Ketsy. It was an accident.
Oh, okay, no problem.
Well, Council President, just if you don't mind, just a matter. Yeah, if you don't mind, Council President, was there a response regarding will district members be notified in the event ahead of time if a safe injection site will be targeted for their district from the city solicitor's office? I don't know if I heard a direct response. I might have missed it. I'm sorry.
Council President, I was going to ask a similar line of question to that. I think Councilmember Lozada's question kind of created questions for me. I'm more confused than what I was prior to the start of the conversation. That was
Can we
welcome? That's how my community feels. Just that's confused.
All right. So can we
Can I get a point of interest, Council President?
Okay.
Okay, the point of interest is, can we get the people on this hearing that can answer the needed questions? And
that's a different question. We gotta use a point of information
okay
for a particular purpose, and we're gonna have a little tutoring on that. All right.
Okay.
So there was a question. There was a reference to a question that was asked that there was not clarity on if there was an answer or not. Councilman Johnson had a point of clarity for that, and Councilman Thomas was going to be the line of questioning. So in the same response to Councilman Thomas having been queued up and Councilwoman Lozada's question with respect to her earlier question. Madam Solicitor, can you just answer that question so we can clear the point of information and the point of clarity, and then go into Councilman Thomas's line of questions as it relates to him queuing up. So the first question, will the council member be notified at the onset of a potential decision or likely decision on location?
Right, and so what I would say is that that's a question that should be asked of the managing director's office as it's their decision. And again, that's why I offered for us to have a meeting with all of you, whoever is interested, with the managing director's office to talk through this.
Okay. All right, Councilman Johnson and Lozada, does that clear up that specific question? All right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Chair
good. Thank you.
and Harity, Councilman Harity, did you have any need to get clarity on that one? Not, but you hit that by mistake. All right. Chair recognizes Councilman Thomas.
Thank you, Council President. Yep. So Solicitor, let me just, so if I understand where we are. So in the city of Philadelphia, from the perspective of law and legal, we are basically saying that safe injection sites are something that can legally be permitted to exist in the city of Philadelphia. That correct?
No, that is not correct. Currently, right now in the Third Circuit, safe injection sites are illegal. That is the prevailing law in the Third Circuit.
Is there a process that's taking place right now to argue against that ruling? Or is the administration pushing back on that ruling that safe injection sites are illegal?
So right now, what I can say is that from the very beginning, the administration, the mayor's office, along with the public health commissioner, filed an amicus brief on supporting Safe House's position. We are not parties to this litigation. As the city, we are not party to this litigation. So I think that's what I'm at liberty to discuss right now. That is of public knowledge.
So from a legal perspective, if the city decides to ignore the decision of the court and move forward with a safe house, what would be the legal consequences?
Well, the legal consequences we would be in violation of criminal law. So therefore, if there was any path forward, and I am solicitor, there would have to be some other type of arrangement, making sure that it was permissible and legal in the eyes of the federal government.
So if the mayor and council wanted to see, if there was an appetite among legislators in the executive branch of government to provide safe house locations, what steps? Because I'm just trying to understand where we are with this. What steps would we have to take in order to put out, like if it wasn't controversial? Like right now, clearly, some folks are for it, some folks are against it. Forget that. Let's say everybody is for it. What steps do we need to take? Would have to happen in order for us to be in a position as a city to allow safe houses to legally open?
I think there would have to be either a change in the current the applicable federal law that is making such an injection site illegal. So therefore, Congress would have to make some type of change to that law. But if the law stays the same and the circuit opinion, right, the Third Circuit opinion right now has deemed it to be illegal, there would have to be some other arrangement made to allow that. So it would have to be some type of.
How do New York do it then? How are they able to get away with it if federal laws was?
That is a great question, Councilmember Thomas. I'm not the solicitor or a city attorney for New York, but I think that is a great question that I think a number of people across the country are asking right now.
Got you. Okay. All right. Hey, solicitor, thank you. This was a great little tutorial for me. I just learned a lot. I appreciate your expertise and your opinion and everything you just told us. Thank you. Thank you, Council President. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Councilmember Thomas.
The clerk recognizes Councilwoman Lozada.
Madam Solicitor, just one real quick question. You mentioned that we were not a part of the lawsuit. Is that correct?
We were not a party.
Okay, but so how are we a part of the mediation process that is currently happening?
I would prefer to answer that offline.
Okay, thank you.
And I will say, and sorry, Mr. McDermott, I will say that it seems like there is, as rightfully so, a lot of interest in this particular topic. And so I would be more than happy, in addition to setting up the meeting with the managing director's office, I'd be happy to set up a separate conversation with you all, with members of the law department and myself on this issue as well, just to make sure, again, there's no misinformation and that everyone can be on the same page.
But also, I think just for the matter of public, rather if people are for or against, just in the matter of transparency, because a lot of this sounds like inside baseball to the outside of public side conversations where the public really don't get an idea to see how this process is very transparent from an accountability standpoint. Just wanted to say that for the record, regardless of people for or against it, but we'll have the side private conversations and I guess report back to the wider public. So.
I understand and I appreciate that, Councilmember Johnson. I think you can also appreciate there are certain things I can and cannot say as counsel. So, and I'm trying to work through all of those different lines. But anything that can provide you all with the right information to then provide to your respective constituents, I'm more than happy to be a part of that.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cortez.
Clerk recognizes Councilman Harity.
Yes. Ms. Cortez, so you're saying that the city, meaning the mayor's office and the health commissioner, is not a party in the legal proceedings, but are they supporting the legal proceedings? That's what I'd like to know.
So no, thank you for that question, Councilmember Harity. So the mayor and the public health commissioner have filed an amicus brief on behalf of this, meaning that they are in support of the the legal injection sites. And that was filed before the pandemic, I believe, either the end of 2019. I can provide that to you in your office or anyone else who's interested in that.
Yeah, I'd definitely like to have that for sure. Point of clarification. So my wife was one of the people on the suit for the Third Circuit. Third Circuit ruled that they were equivalent to the crack house law that is already on the books in the Congress for the United States, and that's why they were against it. So, I hope that as the legislators, and especially the district council people who are going to have to answer for this, will be consulted and informed on what's going on, because we haven't been getting any information. And quite frankly, we come to you, as I know, for our questions legally in reference to this subject. And if we were against it and the mayor is for it, then wouldn't there be a conflict for you? And what would our recourse be? Should we be getting our own attorneys in order to challenge this thing?
Well, thank you, Councilmember Harity. And that is an excellent question, and I'd be happy to provide you the response offline.
So I don't get it. You don't have a response that would there be a conflict for your office to represent the mayor's office and council if we are against it in the same kind of proceeding? And you can't answer here if we should be looking at getting our own counsel.
Because that would be legal advice, and I'm not going to give you legal advice. in
Okay, all
public.
right.
I'd be more than happy to give you legal advice as soon as you all are available. I'm happy to meet with you all in person or over the phone, Zoom, whatever's most convenient for you to make sure that you have adequate representation.
Okay, good. You just gave me my answer, so I'll start looking. Thank you.
Mr. Harity, it doesn't work that way. So again, we can discuss it more offline as to what that procedure would look like.
I have no more questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman. Get back up to snuff. I had to jump off for a second. I'm sorry.
Council President, there are currently no members in the
Do we have
queue
any
for
additional
questions.
questions by members of the committee? Thank you very much, Madam Solicitor. Appreciate as always your stellar representation of this body and for the individuals of the city of Philadelphia. We really appreciate you and your team's work. I look forward to continue to work with you. And as always, please be prepared for a call back in the event that we have some additional questions during the course of the FY24 budget process.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Council President, and to the rest of your council members. It's always a joy and a privilege to work with all of you and answer all of these very important questions, which, again, I'm more than happy to do as early as today when you all are done with the rest of your budget hearings. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Solicitor. Okay, that concludes our testimony from the city solicitor. Next up, we will have the district attorney's office. District Attorney Krasner, are you ready? You and your team ready?
Good morning, Council President. Can you hear me?
Good morning. We have you. Yes, sir.
Wonderful. Thank you.
We're good whenever you're ready.
All right. If there's any problem with the audio, which sometimes occurs, please let me know, and thank you kindly, Council President. I just want to take a minute before we start to acknowledge that even though we are going to talk about numbers today, we're going to talk about numbers in terms of crime. We're going to talk about numbers in terms of the financial support that we need to be a good partner with law enforcement. I want to make sure that we do not miss the human side of this. I want to take a minute to acknowledge family, friends, and the schoolmates of Devin Whedon, a 15-year-old Gratz High School student who was murdered last Tuesday while walking to school. As we speak, his family are celebrating his life at a public funeral service in North Philadelphia. Members of my staff, including our community engagement staff, including G. Lamar Stewart and our CARES unit, have been supporting the family ever since the shooting itself. I would like to single out many different members of council, but the problem is I wouldn't know where to stop because so many of members of council have been so close and so supportive of our efforts in these difficult times. So please, if I fail to mention your name, please understand how grateful we are for all the different kinds of support that we have received from City Council for our collaborations into things like the 100 Shooter Report and into efforts to support specific kinds of proactive things that Council can do and the DA's office can do together in order to increase public safety and increase justice in the city of Philadelphia. I'd like to respect your time and leave as much time as possible available for questions. So I'm going to go through a slide presentation that is not very lengthy, which will include brief presentations of only about 2 minutes by two key members of our staff, and then we will be happy to go to questions. But let me start out, if I may, by going to the most basic points so that everyone understands, once again, the human dimension of the numbers that we are about to speak about. Slide 2, please. And slide 3, please. The funding requests that we are seeking at this time, above and beyond the suggested budget by the mayor, are $7.4 million. And this is a summary of how that money breaks down. So as you may know, council advocated vigorously and successfully for efforts to enable the DA's office to focus very seriously on carjacking with a brand new, never before existing carjacking unit, and also a unit that is dedicated to addressing gun violence and doing so out in the community and in close collaboration with police. In order to have that funding be recurring, because that came, after all, at the middle of the year, and we have moved as swiftly as we can, but to put it mildly, there's so much more work to be done. 3.46 million are needed. In terms of new initiatives, these initiatives have come in almost every instance directly from members of council and directly from community through members of council. I'll go through them in this presentation, but simply put, they are quality of life measures that include going vigorously after organized retail theft, which has never been done in the city, going much more vigorously after home and deed theft. All we need there is resources, and going vigorously after the kind of government accountability and public integrity measures that make so much of a difference in the lives of Philadelphians. Protecting elections, going after abuse of IOD, which is a $50 million a year scam that essentially covers the entire budget of the DA's office and frankly undermines our good and hardworking members of the Philadelphia Police Department every day, and supporting the prisons in their investigations of corrupt activities, criminal activities that are occurring inside. In terms of retention, our office has done everything we possibly can to improve retention, and that it is working, but we will continue to need your support. Every dollar that is invested in this office has the potential to come back to the taxpayers 10 or 100-fold, and we are very grateful that we have enjoyed some success as a result of support from council. That breaks down into various subparts. Finally, there's an equipment need of $269,000, and the total request, therefore, is $7.4 million. Slide 4, please. Outside of our budget, there is more money needed for the purpose of protecting victims and in some instances witnesses. Once again, that's not part of our budget. That's money that's with the MDO. But council, frankly, was visionary several years ago when they put aside a pot of city money that would supplement the much more restricted state money. More is needed. We remain in the middle of a gun violence crisis, and so that all of you understand the position of our office, which in my mind is in a good shape, we have never faced such a caseload of homicide cases. There are 680 pending homicide cases at the felony level. What I mean by that is 680 cases that have gotten past the preliminary hearing, are waiting to go to trial. We chip away at them every day, and the hardworking detectives of the Philadelphia Police Department, who are enjoying some improvement in their ability to solve cases, send us new cases. So obviously that means we have to not just make sure we have enough ADAs, which we do, but we also have to make sure victims and witnesses are protected, victims of shootings rather than, homicides, obviously, but that witnesses are protected so that we are able to successfully prosecute these cases and protect the people who have the courage to come forward. That money is for relocation and protection of witnesses. Next slide, please. Now I'd like to talk briefly about the Organized Retail Theft Task Force. Next slide, please. So that you all understand, traditionally in Philadelphia, and I have been an attorney in the criminal system here now for 36 years. Traditionally in Philadelphia, what happened is that individuals were arrested for retail theft. There was no serious effort to go after fences, by which I mean people who accept the stolen goods from thieves and then resell them in some way or another. Well, what we are seeing at this time takes two forms. There is a small number, and I repeat, the data shows it's small, of prolific retail theft offenders. Those individuals we are prosecuting vigorously. They are not simply receiving summary citations, which is what we ordinarily do for people who have no prior record or are obviously affected by addiction and have no serious criminal history. These are for people who just keep doing it. They are facing felony consequences, state time, misdemeanor consequences, county time, depending upon their situation. But fences, what I'm talking about now is that the world has changed. We have an internet, which has become perhaps our biggest marketplace, and it's become a huge marketplace for stolen goods. There are operators within Philadelphia who are fueling retail theft by putting out lists of items they want and paying in drugs. No, I'm not kidding. They are paying in money, they are paying in drugs, they are putting out lists of high value items and other items because they know what they want, and they are going to sell it on the internet, perhaps to the tune of millions of dollars, and they are also going to supply a lot of smaller business establishments in Philadelphia with these stolen goods by selling them wholesale at a reduced price compared to what those vendors would pay from a legitimate source. Next slide, please. Home and Deed Theft Task Force. In many ways, this is one of the great successes of this office, but it's a great success that needs to grow with more resources because we are not in any way past the crisis of home and deed theft in Philadelphia, and it really undermines the entire city. I'm going to briefly, for only about 2 minutes, call forward the chief of our economic crimes unit, Kim Essick, so that she can explain 2 slides to you, and then I will be right back. Ms. Essick? No, that's not easy.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kimberly Essick. I am the supervisor of the Economic Crimes Division in the District Attorney's Office. I have been here for 20 years, and I was also a prosecutor in Montgomery County for 2 years prior to coming here. I've been in the Economic Crimes Division dealing with deed thefts for many, many years now, and we have made great strides over the years. There had been complaints in the past that we weren't taking cases, but we are. We have multiple large-scale investigations. To give you an example, this first slide here is just something I put together as just a sprinkling of some of the properties that have been investigated over the years in our investigations, and is by no means a complete picture of the situation, but it shows you how it is across the city. With more resources, we would be able to do more. These cases spiral pretty quickly into what I consider to be large-scale investigations, and I would be able to do much more if we had the support and the team in order to do so. We work very closely with the Philadelphia Police Department on their cases that are on a more smaller level, but we also need the support here within the office to do the larger scale investigations that they just cannot do as line detectives when they have so many other cases to deal with on a daily basis. To give you a quick example, just this weekend I received a complaint for what I thought would be a single property investigation. Once I looked into it, in about 2 minutes, I realized it's related to a current investigation I have ongoing for a notary that we are investigating that has about 20 properties that we have under her. And then after that, I realized that there's an LLC on this case, which now spiraled into at least 10 more properties I now need to tear apart with multiple notaries in that. And that was just a matter of 5 minutes I was able to determine that. But that's myself doing that, and we need more support in order to bring these investigations to light and to be able to basically stop the targeting of these properties throughout Philadelphia.
Thank you. Slide 10, please. Another one of our needs, and once again, these needs are coming in almost every instance through members of council, is for additional support for the public integrity work.
We cannot see the slides. There's a bunch of us on the chat. None of us are getting it. It says reload to display presentation. I keep hitting it, keeps coming back up.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Harity.
Sorry about that.
No, I appreciate your saying it. I'm not sure what the solution is, but I'll ask my team to try to work on it. Yes, Council President.
No, I was just going to say thank you, Councilman. I thought it was just me, right? My lack of skill sets as it relates to technology. So it's good to know that it's not just me. But okay, we have you on screen now, but not the slide.
Well, all right.
We understood that.
I'll be happy to continue speaking. I'm sorry to hear that the slides are not available. I don't know whether, we will do everything at our end. If there is something that needs to be done at your end, then we would appreciate it, but we'll continue delivering the information verbally. Apparently, some people can see it. Some people are texting us that they are able to see it, and then others cannot.
Yeah, we could, DA, we can forward them over your presentation.
All right, very
afterwards, and we'll be able to. I mean, it's going to be a long time before we make a decision on the budget, so we have time to review.
I understand. Thank you, Council President. All right, I would like to talk a moment, though, about public integrity. That is our conviction integrity unit, which many of you know because of the exoneration work that they do and the work to improve practices. So prosecutors and police are not hiding information from the defense, information that may include information showing innocence. And also our SIU, that is the Special Investigations Unit, which is charged with the most sensitive investigations, some of which involve public employees. Next slide, please. Slide number 11 is what I'm looking for here. So the work of CIU and SIU includes some extremely important work. It includes the protection of elections from anti-democracy crimes. What am I talking about? I'm talking about people bringing AR-15s to a vote count. I'm talking about militias threatening to show up at places in ways that are intimidating. If you're able to catch up, we're looking for slide number 11, please. They also protect the Philadelphia Police Department from individuals in PPD who are abusing IOD. I won't go through the coverage from the Inquirer. You're all aware of it, but it is crucial because PPD, like every other police department in the country, faces staffing challenges. They are struggling and doing their best to try to meet it. And it is also true that there's a certain portion of people who are on IOD benefits who belong there. Traditionally, that looks something like 2 to 4% of the Philadelphia Police Department, we can assume, are legitimately and properly using their IOD status. However, that swelled due to problems with the heart and lung legislation and also due to problems with the doctors who were administering it, all of them selected by a certain leader of the FOP. It swelled to about 13%. When you start talking about potentially 9% of people who are unnecessarily on IOD, when we have a staffing crisis in the middle of a pandemic and in the middle of a gun violence crisis, it's very serious. And every good cop I know is incensed at what is happening there, and so should the taxpayers be, because you are looking at tens of millions of dollars every year that are going to police officers who could be on the job but are staying home. We need to support the good and hardworking police officers. We need to support the commissioner. We need to support the community by having adequate staffing, and part of that means that there do have to be consequences for people who would like to stay home and receive compensation for that. Another aspect of this has to do with the prisons. There has been perhaps less discussion and less coverage of it, but this office has successfully and vigorously gone after illegal drug activity in the prisons, which many of you know has led to multiple overdose deaths. We have gone after the contraband supply of cell phones in custody. There are not supposed to be any cell phones among inmates in custody, and those cell phones are being used for all the wrong purposes. They have been smuggled in some instances by correctional officers who get paid to do it, sometimes paid on PayPal. And we have gone by inmates, and we have gone vigorously after that. We need to do more of it because we need to clean up that situation to support the prisons. And then, I mean, it even went so far in one of our investigations, as it turned out, there was a purchase of a long rifle. It was a semi-automatic long rifle, which was orchestrated from prison. And it was done through the same means, cell phones, PayPal. This is unacceptable. We can't have a prison system where there is criminal activity going on all the time that in some instances involves a few corrupt correctional officers and also involves outside vendors who are using their ability to get into the prisons to commit crimes. Finally, we need to protect people with even-handed justice. And what that means is we need to continue to get people who are innocent out of custody, not only because it's wrong to have them in jail, but also because those crimes were never solved, and they should be solved. And the victims of those crimes and survivors of those crimes deserve to have those investigations reviewed again. Just one example of this would be the historic prosecution of homicide detective Nordo, for his multiple sexual assaults and rapes of informants and his abuse of the process in ways that corrupted several homicide investigations. Next slide, please, slide 12. And for the benefit of my own team, I'm not able to see these slides at all anymore, so I don't know what's happening there, but we'll keep working on it. Bail revocation and appeals program. So one of the things that has never existed in this office and would help is the ability in the middle of the night to, at a bail hearing, not only to seek a higher bail for someone who had a gun case or had a violent case and picked up a new gun or violent case. Not only do we ask for higher bails there, which we don't always get because the bail commissioners, frankly, are giving bails that I consider to be generally way too low for shooting cases and other very violent cases, but we would like to have another tool. And that tool is the ability to immediately seek in the case that's already open, the case that was open when this person got arrested, we want to seek a revocation of that bail. We want to let the judge, whose bail it is, know that this has happened and ask them right away to revoke that bail. Because if we simply have to deal with the bail that the bail commissioners put down, often it is too low and it gets paid quickly. We want the judges who are supervising someone on bail to know that there has been a new arrest. That would involve slides apparently are not working. I guess we will have to share them with City Council at a later time. So that involves needing a few staff members who can basically work around the clock and be in court by the next morning trying to get the prior bail revoked before someone is able to get together their funds and get out, which a lot of them do. Our gun violence task force is an entity that has done remarkable work and has expanded tremendously from simply looking at a variety of straw purchase cases and other gun possession cases to deep dive investigations of criminal organizations such as 0 to the 4 and major busts that have occurred around that. We are on slide 14 of a presentation that I guess is not visible right now, but will be supplied. And that presents the opportunity for me to introduce to you for only about 2 minutes, and then we will be done with the slide presentation, to introduce to you Melanie Nelson, who is the head of our CARES unit and will be speaking about relocation funding, speaking about the CARES unit, and speaking about the reality that our victim witness work has doubled. I repeat, doubled in terms of personnel and in terms of its breadth and its significance in the last 5 years. And obviously that was necessary to meet the demands of the time with the gun violence crisis we continue to face. It is my honor at this time to present Melanie Nelson.
Good morning, everyone. I'll speak to you briefly about what CARES does, and then I will speak to you briefly about what we experience as responders. So the CARES unit, responders, everyone including myself, we are deployed from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day, Monday through Friday, Saturday, Sunday, holidays, weekends, and we are deployed to crime scenes. So we are providing crisis support to the mothers, the fathers, grandmothers, grandfathers, community members, and friends while that body is still on the scene. We are providing crisis support at that moment. We're also deployed to the hospitals to where we're able to provide crisis support if that homicide victim was pronounced in the hospital. Please understand our biggest demand and our biggest ask is relocation. For those who do not feel safe, think about that husband that actually decapitated his wife, and they have 2 teenage children, and they were not eligible for relocation under the Victims' Compensation Program. So we were not able to help them. But relocation, that need is significant. Think about that man who actually shot and killed his girlfriend, who is the mother of his children. They have triplets. And he did that while they were sitting down eating. And now the grandmother of the homicide victim has to relocate and has to raise three children. So the need that we get all the time is for relocation. We have people that are in fear for their lives, and it is just sad in the city of Philadelphia where it seems like a human life has no regard. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Melanie. Formerly in charge of Northwest Victim Services, an organization founded by her mother. Like so many other people in this office, she comes here with deep roots, and those deep roots allow her to bear a lot of fruit, and that fruit has been some of the best things we've been able to do for victims and witnesses in Philadelphia. That is all I have by way of a slide presentation. I am happy to try to respond to any inquiries or thoughts from members of council.
Thank you, DA. I have a couple of questions before I turn it over to my colleagues. So DA, you referenced the internet and basically the social media issues. So I've seen, and I'm sure most people have seen, a number of these videos that are being put on by individuals that are referencing crimes that they committed. I don't know if it's legit, showing guns. I mean, the whole 9 yards, this drill music. Is there a role that the DA's office plays in this? And some of us, and the average person looked at it, they don't understand, like, why can't we use the technology that we use to get, terrorists or get other criminal activity, right? And in a lot of people's minds that live in these neighborhoods, this is equally as problematic. Is there a role that the DA's office plays in this, being able to use technology to find out who these people are and if some of the claims that they're making is actually legitimate?
Council President, thank you for that question. The answer is yes. The District Attorney's Office Gun Violence Task Force has a number of social media analysts whose work is specifically to look for things on social media that can be used as evidence, either in terms of an investigation or in terms of a prosecution. Perhaps it is worth saying to you that our world has changed. If you went to a trial or a preliminary hearing 25 years ago in Philadelphia, what you would see was witnesses sitting up there on the stand, some of them quite reluctant, or detectives talking about what witnesses said in a closed room. And that would be your case. That's not our case anymore. Our cases now are often street video, some of it private, some of it public, social media, and sometimes we put on whole cases where we do not have a single witness because there is such a reluctance on the part of witnesses to come forward. So I think you raise an excellent point, which is that the future of investigation and the future of being able to solve crimes has to include the use of social media. Now, obviously, some drill music, as they put it, really is just fiction. There's nothing new about that, but some of it is real. Some of it is people stirring up trouble. Some of it is people bragging about crimes that they've occurred in great specifics. And we win cases, not every single day, but we win cases every month where there are videos and there are lyrics that relate to specific planning or relate to specific bragging about crime where the details are evident. In fact, I just went over one the other day. The United States, of course, has a constitutional protection under the First Amendment for free speech that is broader than in many European countries. And at this moment in our legal development, it makes it very hard to go after people either in civil court or in criminal court for things that they do on the internet. Perhaps someday we'll get our arms around that better, and we wouldn't have to deal with what you're speaking about or the reality that there are kids all over the country stealing Kia automobiles and Hyundai automobiles because they saw how to do it on TikTok. But that is what we're dealing with right now.
All right. And so I guess that essentially the federal government's intervention within the Constitution would be more helpful to us be able to deal with on a local level. I guess there's some limitations on what we could do locally. I mean, I don't understand why, and I know the Constitution allows you to have free speech, but there are some limitations on what that free speech is. We have a bunch of people based on January 6th activity that are in the process of the criminal justice system. Because of something they said or something that they incited as a result of their speech.
Council
So I guess that would be.
I agree with you that there's some things that can be done some of the time. I totally agree with that. But, for example, in Europe, there's a duty of care under the European law that says that, an internet provider has to take care for its viewers and not just put out piles of hate and piles of lies to stir people up and not to do things that are likely to induce people to do January 6th. We have a sliver of that, but we just don't have it as robustly as they do in other countries.
Okay. The other issue you referenced in your presentation is carjacking units, something that we're obviously interested in. We did provide some money, I think, during the mid-year transfer. Can you talk to me about what the DA's office role will be in the carjacking unit? And as a result of this money that we put in during the transfer and any additional resources that are provided.
Yes, Council President. So, some of the investigation that has been done so well and so collaboratively between PPD, between the DAO and the FBI, revealed certain things about the pattern of carjacking occurring in Philadelphia. I'm talking specifically about the prosecution of a man whose last name is Akubu. And what has come out in the prosecution of Mr. Akubu for a few homicides, but also for something like 50 to 60 carjackings is the following. Some of it I think everybody already knows, but I just want to be clear about it. And I think that will help me to answer your question. What has come out is that with the inflated price of used cars in particular, there is a trade in Philadelphia and across the country in many major cities, which involves the following. Some adults recruit a lot of juveniles to jack cars. They are looking for specific models of cars, especially, for example, in Philadelphia, Toyotas and Land Rovers. And they're looking for these cars because they can steal a secondhand car worth $45,000 here, and they can sell it overseas for $60,000 or $65,000. And these are in countries where sometimes the annual income for the average person may only be a few $1,000s. What they do with these cars is the cars are jacked by juveniles who may not even know. The adults who have recruited them, they're left in a predetermined location some of the time, and then some kind of a vehicle will show up, and these stolen, carjacked automobiles will be transported to various ports up and down the East Coast. They will be put into shipping containers. They will be sent overseas, and the people at the other end, in a different country, will be the ones who actually have been requesting certain kinds of cars of people like Akubu who are doing their bidding at this end. So the issue obviously is much bigger than saying our investigation is done. We found a juvenile who was involved in a carjacking. The juvenile may have done terrible things, but that juvenile is only a part of a much bigger process. That quality of investigation, for that quality, we are indebted to PPD and the FBI. But I'm also indebted to Joanne Pescator, who's the chief of our homicide non-fatal shooting unit, and dived in with both feet to make sure we got that information so we would understand it. Now, the carjacking unit is taking that knowledge and those relationships, and we are trying to do things the right way. We're trying to evaluate juveniles, understanding their role in this. Some have done things that are much more serious than others. We're trying to get them to cooperate and provide information, because that's how you really get the work done, when you're trying to find the people involved in the shipping and the people overseas and the people within Philadelphia who are paying these juveniles. And we are trying to do similar activity with young adults. But more than anything, we are trying to put a big dent in the levels of carjacking, because that is a crime that is incredibly dangerous and that rightly terrifies the city. I am happy and proud to say that we have put some of our very best attorneys in this unit, that they are working as hard as they can, and that we believe that we will see significant benefits coming from that unit. We are also mindful that when council was kind enough to dig in their pockets and advocate for this, said to us, make sure you spend the money the right way. Well, we are, and we will be accountable for that and subject to whatever audit city council wants. So you make sure you know that the money went where it was supposed to go.
Okay, so I heard your response, and I'm just trying to understand the money that was given and any future dollars for this, because this is a big deal. How specifically does that money go towards solving the issue? I know about you told us a little more detail about the federal nature of it, the international nature of it. What role does the people that you hire or the resources that you have play in that role? Is it investigative? Or is it simply reaching out to young people to determine why they're engaged in it? I mean, give me a little more specifics on what it is your office does.
Absolutely, Council President. Thank you for that. So Our unit is dedicated, meaning every single prosecutor who is in the unit does nothing but carjacking and closely related cases. We prosecute the cases that are already being solved by PPD, but much like our homicide unit, or our gun violence task force unit, we take a much bigger investigative role than we might, let's just say, for example, for a case of breaking into a car. And that major investigative role, in many ways, has us acting kind of like the U.S. Attorney's Office has acted for many years, kind of like the feds have acted. We're doing much deeper dive investigative work with the same prosecutors who are going to court and are prosecuting cases, and we're doing it on a federal model in that we try to get all of the smaller fish to cooperate against the bigger fish so that we can really get at the people who are driving this. There is a difference, however, with what the feds do, and I say this as somebody who spent, among other things, 25 years in federal court, often in that process of how they did it. The feds, and this is no slam on them, I'm actually a huge fan of our current U.S. attorney and of what the federal authorities do, but their investigations sometimes go slowly and we don't have time for that. So we are trying to be as thorough as our federal partners and our collaborators, but also recognize that since this office will handle 95% of all crimes that occur in Philadelphia, and the feds will handle about 5%, we are trying to move as immediately and quickly as possible because we know when kids have done one carjacking, they may be getting ready to do another one in 5 days. And we need to get in the middle of this and shut this down as quickly as we can.
All right. And I think a part of, at least what I'm hearing, I'm not intimately involved, a lot of these carjackings are vehicles that are stolen and then used in other crimes. Is that a small portion of the carjacking initiatives, or is that a larger part? I'm assuming that all these young folks are not involved in some international ring that are jacking these cars. Some are joyrides, some are just basically getting a car so they can commit another crime. Is that accurate? Again,
it is accurate, but I want to make sure I fill out the picture fully. You are 100% correct that some of these cars are pretty immediately used to carry out a shooting, including, for example, there was a stolen car at the Roxborough high shooting. Some of these other cars are used for joyrides, but there's a very significant portion of these cars that are being jacked for money. And an adult will pay several $100s or maybe $1,000 or something like that to have a jacked car of a certain type left in a certain place. And those young people are actually being compensated. Now, the person who pays them, the adult who pays them, may be making tens of thousands of dollars, but that is a third part to this.
All right. If you can, give us, not now, but give us a breakdown on the percentages. I'm just trying to get a sense of what level of carjacking is related to the international and the broader picture. And I've heard about that. Somebody stole my wheels once on the car I had before, and I was told that it's probably in Africa because somebody like these particular type of wheels off of a particular car. So I heard about that initially. What percentage is that? What percentage, if you can, what percentage is utilizing the commission of other crimes, and what just basically kids out there joyriding?
So I don't know that if I have a percent, but I think the one who could probably give you the best answer on this in whatever way she can is Joanne Pescator, who's the chief of our homicide non-fatal shooting unit, but is also the one who personally handled the Akubu investigation before we had a carjacking unit and is still handling it. She's right here. I'm going to ask her to step up and see if she can give you a little better answer than I have.
Okay.
ADA Pescator.
Thank you, DA Krasner. Good afternoon. Hi, it's nice to see you all again. The DA is correct. I am handling the Akubu case, but Council President, I understand your point. And what we're seeing, particularly in the homicide unit, a lot of these cars are carjacked cars that are involved in homicides. For instance, they'll steal a car so they can go around to a neighborhood, and shoot at somebody in a car that's unrecognizable. That is a problem. I work closely with Helen Park, who is the chief of the carjacking unit. She also handles some cases that are homicides that are done in carjacked cars. So we're trying to overlap with each other if we can. And I just want to piggyback on what the DA said. Sometimes a carjacking case is hard to make out. A person is caught with a car that has been carjacked. But if it's a certain period of time, we can't charge that person with the carjacking if we can't make out an ID. So if a person who got carjacked is not able to identify the person that took the car, we're only left with being able to charge them sometimes with only receiving stolen property, which is a felony of the 3rd degree, because we don't have an ID, which is where sometimes video comes into play. We might have a good video, or the car is taken and within an hour or two, it's recovered by the police. And then maybe the witness is brought to that scene and able to make an ID. So I know that unit is working really hard on getting actual carjacking charges in these cases, but that takes a lot of time and effort and a witness who was able to ID the person that actually carjacked them. I hope that answered your question, but I'm here if you have any more follow-up.
Yeah, I don't want to take up all the time on the hearing, but I do want to follow up on that, because that's a big issue. And again, I frankly speaking, I was talking about this earlier in the hearing about this, during this mayoral campaign, everybody's talking about all the bad things that are happening. It's like, why would anybody live here when you listen to some of these candidates talk about Philadelphia, right? But I do know that people are actually, coming up with solutions and trying to figure this out. And it's not all bad, but I guess.
Yeah, we're working really hard here, Council President. Yeah, we're working really hard here. I mean, I've lived in this city my whole life. I love this city. I've never had another job, a legal job, except this job. So I and my people in my unit work as hard as we possibly can every single day. And we appreciate all your help in helping us retain these DAs that I have in my unit. Some of them don't have a lot of experience, but they're getting experience every day. And that's what we need. We need experienced prosecutors to actually try these cases so that we win and that these people are taken off the street.
Okay. All right. Thank
you.
Thank you. And I look forward to following up with you.
Council President, we'll be happy to follow up however you would like.
Thank you, Ms. Diaz. Ms. Diaz, just one last question. Not looking for any long answer. Just real quick. In your testimony, you referenced and you did emphasize small, relatively insignificant portion of the following departments that had challenges. You talked about the police. Clearly, there are some police that shouldn't be police. Similarly, in corrections, you referenced individuals bringing in contraband. There were corrections officers, and other individuals. The courts, the limitations on the ability to deal with bail and in the middle of the night, some of the things that there are shortcomings there. You just referenced the feds, the slowness of their work product. Is there anything in the DA's office that you and your team can do better, or there may be some shortcomings in the DA's office? I mean, I know there's some here with me. I think about it every day. I know some stuff I could do better. Is there anything in the DA's office that you all can do a little different or a little better?
I mean, the short answer is yes. And where do I start? The process of criminal prosecution involves, even in a simple case, about 10 really important decisions that profoundly affect human lives. We have 35,000 new cases a year. So, many of those cases, homicide cases, for example, may involve 100 important decisions. So we literally make millions of important decisions a year, and we don't always get it right. We are, after all, managing risk. More specifically, one thing that we could do a lot better, and I won't dwell on it because you know where I'm going, is we could have more resources, for example, to shut down a lot more house thefts. We could have more resources to try to shut down organized retail theft. We could have more resources to keep a lot of our best prosecutors who are making a tremendous financial sacrifice, but to make that sacrifice sustainable. So every dollar we're asking for is not to go out partying or go on vacation. Every dollar we're asking for is to try to do better. What else do I think we could do better within the office? I think that we could do a better job, now that we are getting past the pandemic, of making sure that everybody fully understands our policies. I think we can do a better job of getting our reports out to the public. And I will tell you, we have two important reports, in addition to the one we just did about the position of girls in the criminal justice system. We have an important report coming out that relates to essentially racism in the criminal justice system broadly. It's an effort to see what the issues are so that we can all work together to do better. And we have another really important report coming out that was done by an organization known as eConsult. These are economists who looked at how money was spent and where it's going right and where it's going wrong in terms of juveniles. These are very important and interesting reports. They're not supposed to be blamey. This is not team blame. And they're not also supposed to say that we're perfect, because we're not. But they are supposed to say this is where the problems are and these are the things that we have to work on. So I think we can do we can always do a better job in many ways, but one of the key ones is to make sure that we communicate more fully with the public about what the data is showing, that we are able to make sure that our line assistant DAs are doing exactly what the policies require. And I think so long as we keep with that plan and we retain the talent that we have now, that we will only be getting better.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. DA. Thank you for your testimony. And again, look forward to working with you as we try to deal with these many challenges that we face on a daily basis. Chair will now recognize Councilman Thomas.
Good afternoon, Council President. Good afternoon, DA Krasner. First and foremost, I want to say thank you to the District Attorney's Office and to the folks over there. Definitely have to give a special shout out to G. Lamar Stewart. It's an honor to work with him and to be in communication with him as it relates to issues dealing with constituents in the city of Philadelphia. I know it's a thankless job that a lot of folks over there have dealing with some of the crime issues, but it's very much appreciated. Couple questions.
Sir.
Start with the carjacking. We talked a little bit about it earlier. I listened to Council President's questions around carjacking and the carjacking unit. What impact is the issues that we're facing over at CJC having on carjacking problem that we're facing? Myself and some of my colleagues met with some of the judges and some of the folks who are at First Judicial District. And one of the things that they told us was, actually, you know what? I'm not even going to say what they told us because I don't think that's a good idea. But they communicated concerns basically around first-time offenders as it relates to carjackings. How is the issues as far as folks, it being super crowded over at CJC, having an impact on the work you're trying to do around carjackings?
So first of all, council member, you and I go back a little bit, and I really do want to thank you for what I view as your unrelenting support of young people. And this includes before you were on council. It includes when you were just running basketball camp with Chris Woods. I really appreciate the energy there, because a lot of us who are reform prosecutors view how we handle juveniles as being crucial to public safety. Juveniles are obviously more correctable. They're more rehabilitatable. And if we don't rehabilitate them, then we're going to have what we have now, which is adults who have set off on a life of crime. So, I don't say that to fluff you up in any way. I say it because I think you deserve it, just like so many other council members have done incredible work. And, if not today, then some other day, I hope to give them the credit that they deserve for the wonderful work that they do. I'm not going to speculate as to what their concerns may be. I think that, every case is different, and this is an office that is acutely concerned with individual justice. In general, first-time offenders are people who have not shown they're incapable of rehabilitation. So some of them are entitled to more of a break than people who are on the third or fourth carjacking or have been involved in a shooting before, and now they're involved in a carjacking. My friends on the bench at the Criminal Justice Center face a lot of challenges. One of the challenges they face is they don't have enough judges. It's not their fault. There happens to be a war going on in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania between Republicans and Democrats, having to do, among other things, with gerrymandering, and the punishment that is being administered on Philadelphia, among other cities, is Republicans are using their power to deny us the number of judges we need. We're down about 8 judges. I don't know if they share that with you, but it's a struggle that they have, and we work every day, and so does the Public Defender's Office, to try to make it something that we can manage, because it affects the flow of cases. If you got 8 more courtrooms open and you got 680 pending homicides, some of them from carjackings, you can just move these cases more swiftly, and it's more protective of witnesses and victims. And it also allows for consequences to come more quickly. When consequences come more quickly, others who may be thinking about doing that crime know it, and they're less likely to do it. So, that's an important aspect of it. There are some first-time offenders who deserve, I guess, as Councilmember Jones has said so eloquently, and I'm going to get it wrong, but the hand of mercy. And there are other ones who deserve the hand of consequences because the act is so heinous in and of itself, or because it's the situation where they're simply unwilling to go in a positive direction. And we try to do that individually with every single case.
Real quick, D.A. Krasner, because I want to move on to the next topic. Do you think that there are instances where, because of the overcrowding issues over at CJC, or do you think there are instances where somebody probably should have been held or sent to CJC, but instead they was given house arrest? Does that happen often because it's too crowded? And it was like, oh, well, pre-pandemic, when it wasn't this crowded, we would have sent that juvenile to CJC, but because it's so crowded, we'll give them house arrest. And I'm sure you've seen, I know your team is on stuff like this, but clearly the young people done figured out on TikTok how to get rid of those house arrest bracelets and still, leave the house where they're not supposed to.
Okay, I'm going to have to apologize. I misunderstood you. I thought you were talking about the Criminal Justice Center. You are speaking of the housing of juveniles in juvenile custody.
Yeah.
There is a crisis.
46th Street out there.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So there is, without question, a crisis in the juvenile system. And, Bob Listenby, who's one of our first assistants and was Barack Obama's chief of juvenile justice for the United States, works on these issues every day. He is here, and I'm happy to have him address it as well. But the bottom line is this: when they shut down all the snake pit placements in Pennsylvania, and a lot of them were snake pits, and they were very ineffective at turning young people away from crime, and they were very ineffective at educating it. When they shut them down, they provided no replacement. So we end up with a system where you really only have two ways to go. You have ways that are not very restrictive, and you are ways that are extremely restrictive. For people who belong in that middle zone, those facilities do not exist at this time. And it is such a crisis that you have a lot of people who get stuck in the wrong kind of a place, and some of them are now being sent to Texas. Rather than, to me, that makes no sense. It is a struggle that we have to face, because the best way to rehabilitate juveniles, even juveniles who may, for example, play a minimal role in a carjacking, they don't have the gun, they don't drive the car, etc., but it's a serious crime and they have some involvement. The best way to address them is, if they have to be placed, to have them placed in Philadelphia, where they can have contact with their families can visit them. That's also the best ways to serve the Philadelphia economy, by having Philadelphia jobs. And some locations already exist in this city, including some smaller carceral type facilities or some smaller housing facilities that are actually available. We don't have to start on a 10-year project to build these things in Philly or close to Philly, because some of them are out there. But it is something that, sadly, I wish we had all been able to move on in the pandemic, because we're a couple years behind where we need to be. I think there is no question that we are suffering under a lack of mid-range facilities that we need.
Yeah, I'm sorry, D.A. Krasner. I got a couple more questions, and I think there it is. All right, so I guess I'll come back for another round. Thank you for that information. Yep, I'll tee up for another round. I got a couple more questions. Thank you.
Yes,
D.A.
Thank you, Councilmember Thomas.
Council President.
Clerk recognizes Councilmember Gautier.
Thank you. Good afternoon, D.A. Krasner. I want to thank your office for the work that you do to keep our residents safe, especially your efforts surrounding the gun violence epidemic that has been burdening our city for the last few years. We appreciate you and your team, Mike Lee, G. Lamar Stewart, and everybody who is working really hard to make the city safer. I wanted to ask about a few of your new initiatives. So first, can you tell us more about the specific support you need for the House and Deed Theft Task Force, as we know that these crimes impact seniors and vulnerable communities?
Sure, I'll try to be concise, which is not my specialty. I guess some of you know that. But I do want to thank you, Councilmember Gautier. You are welcome to call my phone at any hour, as you have done, but you've only done it because you're that dedicated to your constituents. Mike Lee feels the same way. G. Lamar Stewart feels the same way. Witnesses and victims must be protected, and our time is really unimportant. when it comes to that. And I also want to thank you for the incredible work you've been doing around prevention and many other issues for such a long time, including land use. But you asked me, what are we going to do about house theft, deed theft? Specifically, what we need is more attorneys, more detectives, a little bit more clerical staff. We have a fast car here. We just need more gasoline. It wouldn't hurt if we had another car or two. But simply put, as we scale up with people, we can scale up with prosecutions. It has been way too easy for way too long to steal homes from vulnerable people, especially seniors, including seniors who are ill. It's disgusting in a city that for a long time had the reputation as having the highest level of home ownership. One of the city's glories is that housing is relatively affordable in this magnificent city that we have. And I have to agree with Council President there. Don't believe the hype. This remains an absolutely fabulous city, but it'll be less fabulous if bums keep stealing houses from people. We're grateful for all the good work that's being done in City Hall to tighten up the procedures, but we are also grateful for the opportunity to grab and prosecute more people as they undermine, seniors and they undermine neighborhoods.
Thank you. And can you expound on the number of detectives you have doing this work currently and the number of detectives you'd like to grow to?
So right now, we have between 20 and 25 detectives, DA's detectives at any given time. And understand, we do work closely with PPD, but they have their own staffing crises. A couple of years ago, I explained to the commissioner that this office used to have 100 DA's detectives. We're down to 25, and that we could do so much more incredibly important work that would way more than pay for itself if we had more detectives. The commissioner was kind enough to say, I will get you what you need. And I told her I needed 50. I know that she did that with an open heart and the best intentions. And then the pandemic hit. And when it hit, it changed everything for everybody, as all of you know. Since that time, we have lost more detectives than we have gained. But ideally, we would staff up by something like a total of 50 detectives in the office, and several of them would be working on house theft and deed theft.
Thank you so much for laying that out. Regarding the role that your office has taken involving gun violence prevention efforts, I wanted you to talk a little bit about the 57 Blocks project, named for the startling statistic from a 2022 Inquirer article explaining that a huge percentage of all of the city shootings are occurring on just 57 of our city streets. Can you or anyone from your team explain the community-based approach that the 57 Blocks project intends to take and how that would help us in reducing gun violence?
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I would call on Dr. Oren Gur, who is a criminologist and the head of our data lab, except he is away, or I would call on Reverend Holston, who has made this one of his main activities, but Reverend Holston is dealing with some private issues at this time. I saw him just the other day. He's doing well, but he'll be back full-time soon. So I will speak to it. So 57 Blocks is not a DAO project. It is not something that we need to control or want to control. It is not something that requires the funding to go through us. The 57 Blocks idea comes straight from the Inquirer coverage. It basically stands for this. We have disinvested in certain neighborhoods ever since the era of redlining, and the consequences are predictable. For decade after decade, even when you lock up Frank, Joe, and Mike for shooting people on one of these blocks, you're going to have Bill, Dave, and Bob come behind that. No offense to Bob Listenby, but you're going to have Bill, Dave, and Bob come behind that. And when you lock them up, you're going to have Jake, Tommy, and Michael. I mean, that's what's going to happen. That's the reality. Is you get the bad guys, as they say, you put the bad guys in jail, even on very lengthy sentences, and you have the next generation of, quote, bad guys, unquote. The notion of 57 Blocks is you don't just focus on the people. We've always done that. You don't just try to catch people who've done bad things. We've always done that. You keep doing that. You keep doing it in close collaboration with PPD. You focus on the place. You invest in the place. The city looks at all its different ways of investing resources, and you invest in a place where the money has been taken out and stolen from those residents for a very long time in different ways by the banking industry, by decisions about where votes come from, whatever that may be. The map of crime is, in fact, the map of poverty. Now, the reason I say it's not a DAO project is that the whole notion is that it should be led by a community. It should be led by elected officials who represent community who want it. We don't want to control this, and our role has really just been to try to facilitate it, to use our grant-funded data resources to get data, to go around and do listening sessions throughout Philly. We've probably done something like 20 of those listening sessions, and obviously the issues are different in each community. To let those communities, in conjunction with government, other government, get together and figure out what resources are necessary where. I'll give you a quick example. We had a meeting with North Kensington CDC, and also with Impact, two organizations working in the Kensington area that have decided, instead of doing what sometimes nonprofits end up doing, which is kind of competing with each other for ideas and resources, they've decided to work together. In my mind, they could be a very, very important part. In fact, they're way ahead of us in some ways on the role that Kensington could play in a citywide 57 blocks approach. But I say this to say, this is what in Silicon Valley they call open source. It's a good idea. It's not our idea. In fact, it comes from the Inquirer. The things that we are repeating are coming from community, but it's not our idea. It's their idea. And they're also coming from elected officials, such as yourselves. We would love to see you all grab this horse and ride it and take it somewhere. We view our role as supportive and facilitative, not as controlling it. We don't think we have all the ideas, but we believe that with the proper community collaboration with government, something wonderful could happen with 57 blocks.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you. Clerk recognizes Councilman Harity.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk.
Good afternoon, Council President and District Attorney Krasner. I just got a couple of clarification questions. One is on the retail theft going on. So I thought I heard you say that you were going after the larger people that are actually kind of organizing people to go out and steal a list of stuff that they want or whatever. And I heard you say about the issuing of citations to people who are first offenses and addicted. What constitutes one of the addicted population becoming, for lack of a better word, a serial theft? My concerns are that, I live in Kensington, and we don't have many stores left as it is. They're leaving in droves. We just lost Walgreens because of the theft. Now the seniors in that neighborhood will have to get on a bus to go get medication. I get the point of not wanting to give our addicts a record so that when they do finally get clean, they'll be able to become a productive member of society and be able to get a job. I get all that. But is there a number of times that an addict, say, would get busted for retail theft, where it would then be changed from a summary offense to something a little bit more? Because I'm getting a lot of, it's a lot of complaints. I went to, and it's not just my neighborhood, it's all over the city, of course. I went to a Walgreens in South Philadelphia the other day to get some personal items, and I had to call the clerk over so that I could get toothpaste and deodorant. And it's kind of, is it going too unchecked? Are we giving out too many summaries and not enough people who are, again, for lack of a better word, serial shoplifters? What is our avenue for getting some relief with that?
Well, thank you for that question, Councilman. I appreciate that. In fact, I was actually just I was at Norris Square just last night addressing some of these questions, and it's always good to have the opportunity to speak to community up there. So there's really three distinct buckets here as I see it. We have to go vigorously after fences. These fences are not stealing anything themselves. We are talking about people, some of whom are clever enough to literally be dealing in millions of dollars of merchandise a year. They have facilities where they can gather up the stuff. They are selling it on various platforms on the internet. They're selling it all over the country, maybe all over the world. And some of them are so sophisticated, they're putting lists out on the street, and they have people who are suffering from addiction, who may be homeless, who may in many instances also have mental health issues, which is why they're taking the drugs, because they're self-medicating. They have those people walking around with lists to go steal things. We have to go after those fences. They are running multi-million-dollar operations. Without getting into a whole lot of detail, we have met heavily with people from the business community, including people who are with very large national organizations. I won't tell you all of their secrets and some of the techniques that they're using, but we're all in for that. It is something that's never been done with Philly. There's not much motivation to steal individual items unless people who are addicted to drugs can turn that into money. That's the reality. If you reduce the demand for stolen goods significantly, then you don't have to worry about chasing around people who are on their first arrest or second arrest, because they're not going to do it in the first place. They have other things to do with their time. So that's part of it. The second group is people who could get summaries. Now, the way that goes is actually quite simple. A store owner calls the Philadelphia police and says, there's a guy here who's got 6 containers of deodorant under his shirt. Police show up and they charge them on the spot. They pull out what looks like a ticket book. They write the person's name. They write down the charge of retail theft, and that person will go to court where my office will prosecute them and can prosecute them and get 90 days in jail or 45 to 90 days. People have this notion that my office charges summary. No, we don't. The Philadelphia Police Department charges summaries, and they can do it all day long with staffing. When they don't have staffing, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to focus on shootings. They're not going to focus on a phone call that's coming from Walgreens to say this guy's got a bucket full of deodorant. But we prosecute in one way or another every summary citation that is issued by the Philly Police Department. We don't do that. We don't come to the store and fill it out. They do. So when I hear people suggesting that somehow we don't charge retail theft, feel free to call the police department. That is their job. They have the unique ability to charge retail theft cases that are at the summary level. The third group that you're talking about is prolific offenders. So I'll give you an example. There's a guy who got busted recently. He has had 42 retail thefts. Well, the last time we saw him, he didn't have 42, but he had a lot. We took him to trial on felonies, not misdemeanors, felonies, because we understand what he's doing. He's making a career out of it. We prosecuted him. He went upstate. This man got a state sentence and went upstate. And when he came out, what did he do? He did more retail theft. People like that need to be prosecuted. They need to be incarcerated.
Can I have a point of information, though?
Yes, sir.
If you don't mind, Council President.
Chair recognizes Councilman Johnson.
And I'm going to be brief. But so, Mr. Krasner, can you just give us for clarity? And so if the police, you're saying that they're responsible for doing the actual charges, correct?
For summary, yes.
For summary offenses, right? And I know you said, well, we should get in contact with them, but wouldn't it be pertinent, more prudent, that if this is a major issue, that as opposed to us calling them, that y'all will be meeting and strategizing together to get to the actual solution? Just trying to understand from a leadership standpoint. Like,
I'm not disagreeing.
Not working in silos, but saying this is a major issue. So my team, police team, are at the table around this particular issue, and I understand we don't want to give people more arrest records, right? But why isn't there a strategy to say, okay, well, part of you being arrested, you automatically go to Judge Presenz's. Well, Presenz's not around anymore. We got treatment court to actually force people to get the help that they need, as opposed to you get a slap on your wrist because you stole once, you stole twice. And I'm from the streets. You give me an inch, right? I'm gonna take a mile. It's just the reality of people's mentalities at the end of the day. So I just want to know, do we work that way in terms of strategizing together around this particular issue of retail theft? That's all.
The short answer is all the time. I'm in very regular communication with the commissioner. I meet with her every month. But the Philadelphia Police Department is very well aware that they write summary citations. They know that. And everybody is aware that with few exceptions, the only way we see a case is if there's an arrest or a summary citation. So, let's get real. When you have an understaffed police department through no fault of theirs, with the exception of a few IOD cheaters, but we already talked about that. When you have an understaffed PPD, we all want them going to the scene of the rape, the scene of the shooting, the scene of the carjacking. That's what we want. But there's a narrative out there that needs to be corrected. And the narrative is this. The true narrative is this. If PPD issues a citation, then there is already a court date. People go to the court date and we prosecute it one way or another. If we see a case where it's a prolific offender, we're going to upgrade those charges. If we see a case that involves a fence, we're always going to come after somebody like that hard. We are all about this getting done, but there's not a whole lot I can do when a store owner calls PPD and there is either no response or, let's just say there are stories being told about why it is they can't issue something that requires them to pull out a ballpoint pen.
Yeah, that's actually good information because, that's kind of the thing on the street is that, you could steal up to $500. You're just going to get a summary or whatever, and then there's not going to be any charges or whatever the case may be. The problem is being an addict, knowing addicts. If somebody is stealing $500 worth of merchandise, that means they're getting about $50, about 10% for that merchandise. So that means their habit's most likely about $50 a day. The problem with that is that addicts' habits go up as they stay out there longer. So a couple of weeks from now, his habit's going to be $100 a day, and he's going to have to steal $1,000 a day worth of merchandise. And that's what's happening in my neighborhood. We're overrun with it. And, it's kind of frustrating. My neighbors, they go into a store and they're sitting there at the counter paying for their merchandise. And a guy comes in, throws a bag down on the floor, takes a whole shelf, throws it in the bag, picks the bag up and walks out. The person buying looks at the clerk and the clerk goes, anything under $500. There's got to be an end. We got to figure this out.
But there also has to be an understanding of the policy. The policy is no matter what, if you get caught stealing 5 cents, we will prosecute you for a summary. 5 cents, 10 cents, 12 cents. We will prosecute you for a summary in an appropriate fashion. And the only thing that a store owner and the police have to do to get that person to a court date is pull out a ballpoint pen after a police officer shows up and write out a ticket. That's all they got to do. So if someone is suggesting to you, we don't prosecute below $500, that's flatly untrue. Above $500, we don't do summaries. Above $500, we're talking about prosecuting people at higher levels, misdemeanor levels, or even felony levels. And obviously, the existence.
We need to get that information out there because there's a big. I'm telling you, it's everywhere, District Attorney. And there are some. I get it. Rumors are rumors, but in my neighborhood, when you look at all the stores shutting down and now losing our Walgreens, it's kind of frustrating and, you tend to start feeding into stuff. So I'm glad you're clarifying that. But for those people that are in the summary in the small level, is there a number that moves them up into like being a habitual person of some sort? Is there an actual number of how many times we catch them doing that before they would be turned into something higher charges? I'm sorry. That's my last question.
Sure, I understand. Well, we are generally, we don't have bright lines in general, but I can tell you this. What we see is about 95 to 98% of the time, people who get arrested for retail theft have not been arrested that year for that. You're looking at a one-a-year situation. Those kinds of situations, we're not going to automatically elevate that to a serial offender. But, on the other hand, when you see somebody who in the space of 3 or 4 years has had 42, those people are automatically going to be elevated. And our phones are always on for police intelligence. When police call and say, look, they're not getting them a lot, but boy, am I hearing a lot about this dude, then we will frequently elevate those cases as well.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Johnson.
Thank you, Council President. Just a couple brief questions, just in general, but let me start off by acknowledging your outstanding government relations person who keeps me abreast of all things District Attorney's Office, Mr. G. Lamar Stewart, as well as my good friend, your Chief of Staff, Mr. Mike Lee, and then specific shout outs to Ms. Joanne Pescator, Chief of the DA's Homicide Non-Fatal Shootings Unit, Erica Rebstock, Assistant Chief of Staff, District Attorney's Office, Homicide and Non-Fatal Unit, Kristen Nguyen, Assistant District Attorney of the Homicide and Non-Fatal Shootings Unit, Assistant District Attorney Angela Brennan, District Attorney's Office, the Carjacking Enforcement Unit, and Helen Park, Chief of the District Attorney's Office, Carjacking Enforcement Unit. I want to get on specific shout outs. I'd be remiss, I probably couldn't walk the streets of Philadelphia, but you elevated her so high. It's Deborah Watson Stokes, and so, you know, she's a legend. But she like bigwig now, I don't know, sitting next to you, part of your team. Because I know this work that we do isn't easy. And so I want to take a moment to acknowledge the work that y'all are doing because, you know, we've been in a constant state of crisis as relates to us just addressing public safety as a whole. It is all of our responsibilities. And so I want to acknowledge those individuals for their hard work and dedication around some very key issues that's very near and dear to my heart. And so I'm going to start with around the issue of gun violence. So just can you give me a brief update on where we're at in terms of the percentage of successful prosecuted cases, also cases that have been dismissed, and cases that have been withdrawn. So that's what I would like to have an update on. I know you're requesting some funding around the issue of bail, and if you can just give us an update on the percentage of, excuse me, we're on spring break, so excuse the children. Not excuse me, but, you know, I'm home spring break with the children. So also the percentage of cases that you require that $1 million bail and where it's denied, and then the percentage of cases we actually appeal to try to keep individuals who are extremely dangerous, you know, at least behind bars until, you know, we can address them properly. So that's the 4 areas: is bail, successful prosecution, those cases that are dismissed, as well as those cases are withdrawn. I know you talked about the importance of forensics on the police side, and so I know members of the city council advocated. So now we're going to hopefully soon have a very robust forensic program that's going to be expanded, new buildings, so we got proper evidence. We just not locking people up without improper evidence. And so those are key areas. And last but not least, I just want to also thank your team for the integrity unit and bringing home India Spellman, their hard work and their dedication for bringing that young lady back home to her family who was falsely accused, and also holding people accountable that basically, you know, take advantage of our protect and serve position and individuals who have been arrested based upon bogus evidence. So I'd be remiss if I didn't just acknowledge you and your team for standing up for providing real justice and not people just being railroaded for the sake of winning a case.
Well, council member, first of all, I want to thank you for all the incredible work that you have done around gun violence as, you know, one of the leaders in public safety within council. There's so much more I could say because we've had a lot of in-depth conversations around those points. But let me try to get to your concerns real fast because I don't want to forget it. For a few years now, the word we have gotten from PPD was it took $50 million to have a state-of-the-art forensics lab. And they do, in fact, have an excellent team with a factory that's much too small. Well, that number just moved. The goal line has moved from $50 million to $150 million, which, of course, is a little disappointing to be hearing at this time. But it is no reason to turn away from what is essential. Our PPD is not going to be able to solve more crimes just like any other PPD or any other PD in the nation without having the tools. And I can't think of anything that's more important for all justice purposes, including public safety, solving crimes, making sure innocent people don't go to jail, than that. Obviously, none of that has to do with my budget, but my mouth is going to be open and hollering until we have a state-of-the-art forensics unit here, because it needs to happen. Point two, you referenced the conviction integrity unit. You know, part of the reason we've had so many exonerations of innocent people is that we didn't have those forensics. So we end up paying the money a different way in all kinds of lawsuits 30 years later after the guilty person got away and the innocent person went to jail. It just doesn't make any sense. Our CIU unit now is busting their butts. They've been doing that now for years. They are national leaders in some ways, but they have 1,000 cases for consideration. I get calls from many council members saying, what's going on with XYZ case? And the problem is it's been in the unit for 2 or 3 years. We don't have a choice. When you're trying to handle 1,000 cases with a few lawyers and you don't have all the investigators you need, we have to be careful here. We are not interested in letting people out of jail who shouldn't be out of jail. We are interested in getting innocent people out. So this is part of the reason I'm coming to you with my hat in my hand saying, listen, that we can do CIU work and we can make sure innocent people are not in jail, but we need to have more lawyers. We need more investigators to do it. And that is part of our ask here. Now, you asked me how we're doing with gun violence. The short version of that, and I don't have all the data in front of me, but I looked at it the other day. The short version is our conviction rates for homicides is extremely high. It's about 80%. Our conviction rate for non-fatal shootings is also extremely high for that kind of crime by national standards. It's about 70%. How often do we ask for $1 million bail or more on a shooting case? The answer is all the time. Basically every single case. If it's a first-degree murder, we're going to ask for something bigger than that, which is for people to be held in custody without bail. But we ask for $1 million bail all the time. And I can tell you, even for a case where somebody shot somebody, what we are usually seeing is a bail that's about $150,000. It's about a quarter of what we are requesting. And that number is actually only $8,333. If somebody is out there slinging drugs, they got $8,333. Part of the reason that we have made a specific ask here, and it's not a big one, but a specific ask for a bail revocation and appeals team, is that there's certain huge flaws in that process. One of them is you can't freeze people. We can call a judge at night, ask them to change the bail. Most of the time they won't. In fact, there's some judges who, if you call them, are simply going to lower the bail because they don't appreciate a call at 2 o'clock in the morning. You know, I'm just telling you the truth. It ain't pretty, but that's what it is. As soon as that bail is paid, they're out. And there is no appeal to be done when people are out. You can go to a next court date, you can file a motion, but there is a big flaw in what processes are available to appeal it. And that's part of the reason we're asking for a few dedicated lawyers to spend all their time chasing down judges, getting bails revoked, trying to file some sort of an appeal in a way that will have an effect. As for dismissed or withdrawn, it's not a lot when it comes to homicide, non-fatals, and carjackings. It is bigger when it comes to gun possession. And it is bigger because, unfortunately, we are seeing judges suppress evidence in a lot of those cases. It is not the PPD's fault that the law changed in Pennsylvania in the last few years, and you now almost always need a warrant to search a car. Well, unfortunately, there were a lot of cases where no warrant was obtained before the law changed, and there's some cases where no warrant was obtained afterwards. PPD needs the ability to do electronic warrants right away. You can't be waiting 9 hours to get a warrant to go into a car. But we deal with the after effect, which is a judge sitting up there saying, Mr. or Ms. DA, you didn't have a warrant. Police on the street didn't have a warrant. I have no choice as a judge but to suppress this evidence. The gun is out of the case, which means the case is over. That is happening too often. It doesn't mean PPD is doing anything wrong, but it does mean that 20 years ago, they should have had electronic warrants, that they're getting there now, but we got to tighten that up. And I say that in a spirit of collaboration. We got to tighten that up, or we are going to have more gun possession cases that are suppressed as a result of the manner of search.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman.
Council President, I'm going to wrap up. I just want to do a follow-up. I know you have your weekly meetings with council members. And so if you could just provide or put together, and I talked to Jean Lamar briefly about this, just give us a status update, specifically a report in writing. Here's the cases we're winning. Here's the case we're withdrawing, why we're withdrawing, and all the details. I remember I came in your office and you gave me a very detailed report and said, here's where we're at, status update. And so, and I will say this, and I do thank your team for really meeting with council behind the scenes, because this public hearing is one thing, but we do meet with your team, and you do give us the opportunity to come face to face, eyeball to eyeball, to do a deeper dive on this issue as opposed to, what we're doing publicly. So, I got to give credit where credit is due, and y'all do allow us to come over there and do a deeper dive. And I have a constituent that's a part of your team, is Myra Maxwell. Give her and her team a shout out, as well as Melody Nelson, and I'll wrap up. Thank you very much, DA Krasner. Keep up the good work. Peace.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Lozada. Councilwoman?
Council President, she said in the notes that she had no more questions.
Good. All right. Chair recognizes Councilman Squilla.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, DA Krasner. Again, appreciate your team's responsiveness. We have a good rapport, and Mike and G, Joanne, the whole team. It's really great to get responses when we reach out. My question is on a lot of the questions we've had that you have answered. But AMP Court, how are we doing with AMP Court, and what are the numbers looking like, and the results since we started? I know it's still only 2 days a week, and I know we're supposed to gear that up, but do we have how that is progressing?
Council member, if you can allow me 1 second, there may be someone here who can give you a better answer. I'm a big believer in AMP Court, as you know, and I wanted AMP Court to go back to 5 days as quickly as possible. I know there have been some staffing issues with the Public Defender's Office, even though we are good to go and ready to go. But if you will allow me a second, I just want to check with my Chief of Staff, who I think might have more information. You know, Mike? And do you want to speak?
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Mike Lee will be coming forward to help assist with that question. Thank you, Council Member.
Good afternoon, Councilmember Squilla. I don't have the numbers in front of me now, but we are finalizing a report for the 2 working groups that we're a part of as it relates to AMP. One is with the other stakeholders at the table, and right now we're trying to adjust our MOU so that we can get more people and more cases in. Not to get too far into the weeds, but before the pandemic, if someone was on active supervision for, let's say, a simple drug possession case, their subsequent case would be ineligible for AMP. And right now we're trying to open it up so someone could have maybe 2 or 3 open drug cases and still be eligible for AMP services as part of our scale out. We're also trying to see if there's ways we can get more people arrested for retail theft at the misdemeanor level into the AMP programs. But overall, the build out has been fairly productive. And we're right now working on issues with bench warrants, more people into the programs, and modifying the MOU so that there's less restrictions on who can get into the program. And as soon as the report is ready, I'll be sure to provide you with a copy.
Thank you, because I know it was a lot of work getting that back up and running, and a lot of collaboration, and we had a lot of meetings on it. And I'm really curious because it does seem like a good opportunity to get people help, especially people with, if we look for a diversion program and how to divert people out of having a criminal record and getting them the help they need, it's really important to be able to have numbers to justify that. So I think I would love to see them when you guys get them together. And if we need to tweak things or do things, listen, if somebody has 3 open cases and none of them went through AMP Court yet, why can't we just put the first one through and then see how that goes? I don't understand all the ramifications of that, but I think we need to find a way to get more people into that program so that we could really understand, to be able to measure the benefits of it, and then see if we need to either add more resources or tweak it in a way. Because I would love to see this up and running 5 days a week and getting more folks into programs. So anything that you could help in the future would be great. Thank you for your time, and I really appreciate the efforts on these multiple offenders for retail theft, shoplifting. It's became a sort of a black market for some of these folks that have 20, 30, 40 retail thefts. And it's important for them to have consequences to that action. So thank you for pushing that forward and looking forward to, do we have a number of how many people have been prosecuted for retail theft?
I don't have it off the top of my head, but again, the focus of the task force is going after the organized component, but we do have a tiered approach where, and just to add on to what the DA was saying, we have replicated a lot of the benefits from AMP in our summary court trial room. So there's a representative from Philadelphia Health Management Corporation, or PHMC, that is in the summary court because there is such an overlap between substance use and retail theft. And then we also are trying to improve the relationship between the regional loss prevention officers, the individual store loss prevention officers, and our court cases, because there's been a historic issue of high turnover in those positions and the necessity for those individuals for trials. But those are some of the issues that we're working through at the table together in conjunction with the Philadelphia Police Department, the Chamber of Commerce, and the Commerce Department to tackle the multi-fronts of retail theft.
All right, thank you for that. And looking forward to seeing those numbers also, and collaborating to make sure that, you know, these folks know that we are serious about, especially these what you call frequent flyers, somebody who has 20, 30, 40 of these retail theft arrests. So thank you for your time and appreciate your work on the SAMP program. I think it's a model that we hopefully could strategize around making it even better, and then looking at ways to change it so that we could make sure we get more people into those programs. Thank you.
Agreed. Thank you. And Councilmember, I also think it's a success of other PPD initiatives like police assistant diversion. So if they're successfully diverting more people at the point of arrest, then we should have fewer people going into the system. And that's something we're trying to explore as well. But thank you so much for your continued support, and we look forward to working with you more.
Yeah, I'd like to see those too, Mike, the numbers for the PAD program, and to see how we're diverting those folks and how that program is also working. Thank you.
Councilmember, let me say this. I know that you've been interested in this issue. We've spoken many times. You and I are both big believers in the accelerated misdemeanor program known as AMP. You and I are both big believers that should be back 5 days a week. And I know that our view, perhaps your view also, is that it should be expanded because it is accountability with services. You know, it's a pain in the neck to do dozens of hours of community service. That is accountability, but it's the kind of accountability that can leave people, because of the treatment that they're required to do, less likely to commit crimes in the future. I will say this, as you may know, we meet with council once a month. We do an educational session with council, and we do it at the suggestion of council. If you are interested in our doing an entire session that has to do with AMP, for example, and retail theft, for example, we would be more than happy to plan that and to do that and to try to find out council's concerns in advance so we can give you all the specifics you might want.
Good, Councilman.
Thank you. That would be great. I look forward to it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Council. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Gilmore Richardson.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. President, and thank you, Mr. District Attorney. I wanted to start by offering high praise, high commendation, and acclamation for G. Lamar Stewart. It is from and through his advocacy that I have even been more deeply invested in closer collaboration with your office and to meet with you all on a more frequent basis so that we have a better understanding of the issues prior to coming into council hearings. And so I want to say thank you to you for those monthly meetings and opportunities, and to your team, but most especially to G. Lamar Stewart. I have to underscore, he is a difference maker and certainly makes a difference for all of us who work with him in council. I also just wanted to briefly thank Angela Brennan and also Joanne Pescator and Jordan King, who I was very impressed by in a recent meeting, impromptu meeting, in fact, that we had recently. And so I want to also say thank you and shout them out especially. You know that in one of the last monthly briefings we had, we focused on juveniles. And I know we've spoken many times about the rise in violent incidents involving young people. Can you explain how your office is planning for the usual uptick in sort of incidents and activities that we typically see over the summer, particularly starting around that June date, recognizing that school ends on June 13th? And if you could talk about how you all are actively and proactively collaborating with the police department, with the Department of Human Services, with the Office of Children and Families, and other partners to address specifically youth violence. I'll start there, and then I have a couple more questions.
Yes. First of all, council member, thank you as always for lifting up some of the wonderful people on our staff, including G. Lamar Stewart, Angela Brennan, who is a shining star on the way up, Joanne Pescator, who does such a fabulous job with homicide non-fatal shootings, among other things, and Jordan King, who's a youngin', but my goodness, that is a youngin' with energy and ideas. Isn't he great? Thank you for that. Let me speak very quickly, then I'm going to call Bob Listenby up, because if anybody knows juvenile, it is Bob Listenby. So very quickly, how are we going to try to deal with an uptick and with additional cases that are going to be coming in? Well, there's several different basic ways. One of them, as you may know, the other day, we gave out another round of micro grants to nonprofits on the ground that are often, run out of their back pocket, but they really need some immediate funding so we can get it out there. It was about $280,000. This is not tax money. This is money that comes from criminals, simply put. And we are going to be putting some more out on the street in about 4 weeks. Unfortunately, I'm informed that Mr. Listenby is off to court, so he won't be coming up here, but I'll do my best to channel Bob Listenby, which is kind of hard since he used to hang out with Barack Obama and I didn't, but I'll do my best. The second thing that we are doing and we continue to do is we are struggling mightily to try to get the entire system to work on the facilities, the mid-range facilities that are necessary for young people who are not able to be out on the street, they're not able to be in their homes, but do not belong thousands of miles away in a place surrounded by barbed wire, because it may not make them better. The way that you make people who are in custody better, especially juveniles, is you make sure you don't shatter their connections to their family. You keep them close to home. This is what has been done all over. Even if they got to be locked up, they should be locked up in a place that is humane, where the education is good. Because we have seen the other kind of facility fail, and then when their snake pit nature was revealed, get close. So we continue to do that. The third thing that will be happening is that there's a very important report, which I think speaks to many of your questions about collaboration with different entities. That is going to have some things to say about how money actually gets spent, how it's budgeted and how it actually gets spent, where it actually goes. That report will be out soon. It is several months in the making. It was done by a team of economists. It was grant funded, once again, not taxpayers, by a group called eConsult. And it's a little bit jaw-dropping. I can't tell you all the headlines right now because that wouldn't be right, but it's a little jaw-dropping. We'll be happy to try to get that to council at the earliest opportunity, even before a public release once it is finalized.
That would be helpful.
Happy to do that. And then finally, what happens around now is our new class of attorneys are going to be coming in, and we have a crew of mid-career attorneys who are just about to pass the bar. When that happens, that is always a wonderful moment, because it means that we can provide additional staffing to our juvenile unit, which will be crucial, because when you have an increase in cases, you need to make sure the caseloads don't get crazy, so we can give every case the attention that it deserves.
Okay, well, we look forward especially to receiving the information from that report. Can you talk about how, if at any, how you all have interacted with the community evening resource centers that have been tasked with being a resource for young people across the police divisions in the city? We currently have 4. one in Southwest Division, one in South Division, one in Central Division, and one in our Northwest Division. We'll be opening 2 additional, one in the Northeast and one in East Division. Once DHS makes that determination relative to the RFP part of their process, which, of course, we are not involved with. And so we anticipate that the announcement will be made in June based on how the timeline of the process has worked. So can you talk about how your office works with and or refers or recommends young people to the community evening resource centers? And then secondly, can you just explain how you determine if and when a young person is eligible for a diversionary program?
Sure. Let me say this. We're very supportive of the resource centers. I'm a little bit at a loss because G. Lamar Stewart is actually at the funeral I discussed earlier, and I understand Mr. Listenby had to run to court to deal with something emergent, so they will have more details for you, and I'll be happy to try to get that to you either by tomorrow or shortly. But I can tell you we're very supportive, and as you know, we try to be as connected to the community as we possibly can, and if they are not already fully on it, I will make sure that we are fully on it. Your second question had to do with diversion. As you may have seen, young Jordan King is a diversion machine. We have vastly expanded the type of constructive options that are available. So it is no longer a multiple choice test of a few possibilities, but we are now talking about a few dozen possibilities of supportive programmings, vocational arts, addressing counseling issues, trauma, things of that sort. And the diversion decisions are made on an individual basis, but we have to do the hard thing, which is separate the wheat from the chaff, as they say in many houses of faith. We have to figure out which kids are the best suited to a life away from crime by diverting them, and how public safety is best served by diversion, as opposed to ones who are pretty dug in to some dangerous behavior who need a different path.
Sure. And lastly, I'll submit the balance of my questions for the record. But I wanted to know if the CERC centers or the community evening resource centers can possibly be included in that as a potential option, recognizing that they are open every single day from 7 p.m. to 2 a.m. for maybe a young person that could be tangentially involved with something and may not be charged something to that degree. And then finally, I just wanted to ask 2 questions because I heard the bell and I want to be respectful of time. But how are you all working with DHS and the defenders to address overcrowding at PJJSC? And then finally, if you could just speak to your philosophy around ensuring that there is collaboration and that you all are working closely together with all of our criminal justice partners and how that work continues to be ongoing. If you could just speak to that, because I think that's an important message that we have to send to our Philadelphia community, that we as criminal justice partners will continue to work collaboratively and work together to ensure that we are addressing gun violence and the uptick in violence that we see in certain areas of our city. And thank you very much. I'll reserve the balance of my questions.
Absolutely. Councilmember Gilmore Richardson, thank you so much. And please give my greetings to your personal assistant who is there with you. I have a personal assistant who is a cat, but that cat is not present at
I
this
have
time.
2 personal assistants like Councilmember Johnson, and they are also on spring break. So they are helping us through this process, and we will certainly get through. So thank you very, very much.
I only wish all Philadelphia parents were that attentive, and then I'd be out of a job, which would be a nice thing. But anyway, coming back to your questions, we work very closely with the defenders. Keisha Hudson is the chief defender now. I think she's absolutely fabulous. She and I and a judge have a weekly meeting where we go over all sorts of issues. Bob Listenby works very closely with DHS all the time. If he were here, I would have him speak to that. Can CRCs be part of diversion? That answer is yes. And I think that's a wonderful idea. I'll check in with Jordan King to see whether that's already underway, but if it isn't, we'll make sure that it gets done. As for collaboration, we collaborate constantly. Really the only stick in the mud, in my opinion, used to be the leadership of the U.S. Attorney's Office. That is not the case anymore. I'm on the phone all the time, texting or speaking to people in the U.S. Attorney's Office, including just yesterday to try to get a couple more ADAs down the street at 601 Market working in the U.S. Attorney's Office on particular cases that are fit for federal prosecution. So our collaboration with PPD, in my mind, is excellent. Our collaboration with all federal agencies is excellent. Our collaboration with federal prosecutors, excellent. Our gun violence task force brings together the Attorney General, Pennsylvania Attorney General's office, and our office. That is a 15-plus year collaboration that I believe is excellent. And I have to say, I think our collaboration is going extremely well. We are all just up against the same problem that all of you face, which is a severe gun violence crisis that continues, even if it is pointed in a slightly better direction. It's nothing to celebrate. We're all up against it, and I would say, and I hope this is true, and I hope you feel the same way, I think our collaboration with City Council is better than ever. And I have to give a lot of credit to Council for being kind enough to ask for sessions, ask for information, and then send staff or attend themselves so that we can really try to get somewhere.
Agreed. Thank you, Mr. DA, and thank you, Council President, for your leniency with the time. But again, on collaboration with City Council, I got to say three things. G. Lamar Stewart. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman, how do you really feel about G. Lamar Stewart?
I got to tell you how I really feel. He's the best of what city government has to offer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. We concur. Chair recognizes, I think, Councilwoman Lozada, you did have a question or two.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on a question that Councilwoman Gilmore Richardson just had and DA Krasner responded to. DA Krasner, I'm happy to hear about the collaborations and how successful they are, because I know that at one time there was a perception that there was not a good relationship, and so I'm happy to hear that they are excellent. My question, though, is when we're in the community, we oftentimes hear that folks come to court and there are ADAs that are not prepared for court because of a lack of experience, and so the cases are not won. And so my question is that the case? Does that still happen? And if so, have measures been put in place to prevent them from continuing to happen?
So, Council Member, thank you very much for the question. I do have to say something in advance, which is anybody who tries to poach Mike Lee or G. Lamar Stewart, I'm coming for you. We are not putting up with that in the DA's office. Don't tell me do better and then come take my people, or I'm gonna do something that's unlawyerly. So let me just make sure that part is clear. And I am kidding. So, simmer down, journalists. Point two, though, the irony was, it was wonderful to see you last night at Norris Square. I was seated next to Councilmember Lasada for a community meeting. And while I will not mention the person, there was a person there who was essentially saying, my car got stolen and I haven't gotten any money back. I didn't get any restitution. There's a part that community member forgot to say. Did not say in public, which is she didn't go to court, okay? That person did not go to court. Why? Because that person had the idea that it wouldn't be prosecuted. Where'd she get the idea? Well, not from me. I can tell you that. Anybody who's putting out there on the street this phony notion that our attorneys are doing a bad job when we got an 80% conviction rate on homicides and our non-fatal shooting rate of conviction is 70%, and you can match up our results with any prior administration. If you include the quality of the cases that we're getting, anybody who's putting that out there is hurting the system. Now, I could speculate as to who might have told a car owner that nothing's going to happen in court, so don't go. But I'll tell you this, I guarantee you, if the witnesses buy that nonsense and don't go, then a whole lot less is going to happen for them in court because they are essential witnesses. We do not have the ability to win a case without those witnesses. Simply put, no, it is not true that we're dealing with attorneys who are in any way lacking. This is the most talented this office has ever been, and that includes the fact that we fight fair. There were prior administrations with experienced attorneys who cheated all day, every day, and are costing the city millions of dollars in lawsuits because they put innocent people in jail by cheating. We don't do that anymore. But simply put, no, I think that what we are showing here is an extraordinarily successful effort at retention in the last year. We are seeing these remarkably talented attorneys, including some that might be considered younger, like Angela Brennan, who is a home run hitter, and Christian Wynn, who is a home run hitter. These are people who are trying cases at the highest levels with tremendous success. There's a guy named Bob Wainwright, just to point out a few of the incredibly talented attorneys here. Last time I checked, Bob Wainwright won 16 out of the last 17 homicide cases he tried, and he tries them every 2 weeks. Okay? That's what we're dealing with here, as opposed to people who in prior eras can be linked to 4 separate exonerations, innocent people who were convicted because evidence was hidden. We ain't cheating. We are winning. Our team is great, but I got to keep them. We're going to have to be able to compensate them so the sacrifice they're making financially, and it is a sacrifice, is sustainable for them.
Thank you for that. When I first got here, I met with members of your team, and I understand that you have in your office about 18 different diversion programs. I asked for a list of what those diversion programs were and how they differ, and how are people considered for these diversion programs. I heard you say that oftentimes some of these folks that are involved in retail theft, it's the first time they get prosecuted when they get to a certain level. And so I guess I want to know, I'd like to know first, what are those programs? If I can get a list of what your diversion programs are, how they differ from one another, and so that we can internally work through what are the considerations sometimes for some of these folks who we feel, of course, not knowing the law, right, that we feel maybe should not be diverted and should be held accountable. But I'd like to know what they are, how they differ, and yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I'd like to figure out how quickly we can get something like that.
Sure. I actually think we can get you a list of the diversion programs very quickly, probably within about 24 hours. I will ask them to make sure they don't just list the name of it, but they flesh out enough so that you have some information. They are quite different when it comes to different things. So, for example, diversion programs for juveniles may be different than for adults, and they may be different for people who are suffering from addiction issues, and they may be different from some of the ones available through PAD, through the Police Assisted Diversion Program, where we never even see the case. I am wondering this, and by the way, I really do want to hear all of your thoughts on what we're doing in that regard. But it seems to me from some of the questioning, both coming from you, sorry, I elevated you, Councilmember Lozada, and from Councilmember Squilla, is that maybe we should have one of our monthly sessions, including possibly one in the near future, be on this specific topic, so we can really give you a wealth of information, you and your colleagues, and get all your input there. The short answer, though, is yes, we'll get you info right away, and we will plan on scheduling a session where we can dig deep on these issues.
Yeah, and my last thing is basically a comment or comment question combination. How do we change the perception that is on the ground around retail theft, right? I think my colleague, Councilman Harity, mentioned it earlier. Councilman Johnson also touched on it as well. There's a perception out there that you won't get prosecuted if you walk into a certain store and you take a specific amount of merchandise. I've been standing in the store at a CVS, at my local CVS, and watched someone come and fill a bag as well and walk out. And I also looked at the cashier like, are you going to do something? And basically he said, there's nothing we can do. Nobody's going to do anything about it. And so how do we change that perception, not only from the corporations, the CVSs, the Rite Aids, the Walgreens of the world, as well as in the community, right? If you are caught doing any type of retail theft and ruining our small businesses the way that they are slowly, you will get prosecuted and you will be held accountable. How do we work together between your office, us as legislators, and the police department that this is not acceptable and that you will be held accountable? How do we do that?
Thank you for the question. Let me answer it in two parts. Part one is how do we do it? That's easy. Part two is how do you change what is a completely false perception that has been put out there by people for whatever reason. Some of it's misunderstanding, some of it's deliberate, honestly. How do we change the perception? But let's start with the most important part, because there are people who believe they have the perception that the weather is controlled by machines. There are other people who have the perception that every election is stolen if a Democrat wins. Those things are not true. So we're not going to be able to get to the bottom of every misperception. But let me start with the reality. What can be done? First thing that can be done is, as I've mentioned earlier, we can go vigorously at the people who are really profiting from retail theft. And those include fences who may be making millions of dollars and providing a market. Second thing we can do is I do not control what stores do, but I have been in this system for 36 years, and I have seen retail thefts for 36 years. Stores can hire security. Stores can stop people. Stores can call police. Stores can do something other than let people come in, steal stuff, and walk out the front, and then say, oh, we're not stopping them. Why? Because of liability. Well, you know, they were stopping people for decades. They can stop people again. Whoever sold them the pill that you can't stop retail thieves because somehow you're going to be sued and you're going to lose millions of dollars is selling them a bad pill. So stores can hire security, pay for those security people to go to court as witnesses. It is also true over 36 years, and people don't talk about this, but you go back to the 90s and the early 2000s, about 80% of retail theft cases, or 90%, were losses, meaning the prosecution didn't win. Why? Because store security will give you the evidence to start the case, but then the employers didn't always pay them to come to court, or store security would turn over and go be employed somewhere else. They're usually not compensated super highly. So the reality is that there wasn't a big win rate before, but at a minimum, stores can do what they want to do. And I don't know where the idea came that people get to go and steal stuff and walk out the front door while store security stares at them, or maybe takes a video of them. If you can take a video, then you can stop people, you can take the goods, you can hold them for police to arrive because they've committed a crime. That's part one. Part two is, obviously we know the struggles that PPD is having with staffing. It's happening all over the country with police. Police can respond. If they have adequate staffing, they can respond, but we all know the truth, which is that they're trying to put out fires as much as possible, and this ain't the biggest fire. So there are going to be some times when they don't go. But my office will not see a retail theft case. I'm going to repeat this. My office will not see a retail theft case unless stores are calling in police after they stop people and police are showing up, at which point they can sign a summary citation and start that prosecution all by themselves. Or if it's a more serious situation, they can arrest, take the person in, and we can charge because it's over $500, or because it's somebody who does it a lot, right? These things can happen. The notion that the DA's office is somehow dropping a ball when nobody ever passes us the ball don't make no sense, simply put. It just doesn't make any sense. Now, as for the perception, let me limit my comment here, other than to say, you know, we are working very actively with the business community who want to work with us on this. We understand the struggles that the police department has. You heard me last night in Kensington talking to the community about this and defending the police, because the reality is you can't expect them to work miracles if they don't have enough people on the job and if they don't have the tools that they need. I mean that very, very sincerely. But rather than doing what government does too much, and I don't mean you at all, but what happens too much in government, which is politicians pointing fingers at each other and blaming each other, this is solvable. Stores just got to do their part. Police just got to do their part. We're already doing our part, and we'll continue to do our part. And I invite any and all players in this to sit down with us, and we'll be happy to talk about how to move it along.
Thank you. Thank you, Council President.
Good.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman Thomas. Second round.
Thank you, Council President. DA Krasner, I'm probably like one of the holdups between now and lunch. And as a former teacher, I know that that's never a good place to be in. So we could be kind of brief in our responses this round, so yes, I'm not holding folks up. That'll be helpful. Let me first ask about gun court. I spoke to you about Judge Boss and 503 and some of the things that happened there. We made some recommendations around gun court and some of the things that we should possibly modify. I'm wondering, do you have any updates on your end as it relates to some of the recommendations around gun court and some of the success that we've had working together as it relates to this issue?
Sure, thank you for that, and I will be quick. We did review your comments. We took them seriously. It has affected some of our practices. The success rate is ridiculous at this point. Gun court does preliminary hearings in cases involving guns, the success rate is ridiculous. It's something like 96% of those cases are getting to the second level, meaning they're headed for trial, they're going into felony court, the next stop is trial. So we appreciate your energy in that regard. We agreed with some of it. We saw some of it differently, but the success speaks for itself, and I appreciate your bringing those issues to our attention.
Thank you, DA Krasner, and thank you for your openness. I think that's an example of your office being open as it relates to communication and transparency and willingness to collaborate. So we appreciate you on that one. Let me get your opinion on something. So as the chair of the Education Committee, one of my biggest concerns is putting together a meeting with a lot of different folks that we need to have at the table in order to address this issue of young people traveling to and from school safely. You talked earlier about the young man from Gratz, and of course our condolences go to that family as well as the entire Gratz community. What do you think, from your opinion, can your office do to help play a role as it relates to young people traveling to and from school? We know every day young people are going to travel to school sometime between 7 and 7:30, arrive sometime between, say, 8 and 9 in large numbers. And then they'll travel home from school between 3 and 5. We all know it, but at the end of the day, we still aren't doing a good job as a city of keeping our young people safe. Give me like a 30-second response to that particular issue that I'm thinking about from my office as it relates to what you possibly can do to be involved in some of the solutions to that crisis.
Well, in a sense, we work on it all the time because anything that makes that travel safer is going to improve. But I know that's not really answering your question. You're really asking me, is there something new that we can do? Is there something different we can do? And my answer to that is we are open to all ideas. I don't say that to put you off in any way. I know how deeply concerning the situation is. I wish I had a magic wand, but it is not my role to control the PPD or control council. It's my role to work with you, collaborate with you. And if you have anything that you think we can do that is more specific and is different than what we already do, we are all in.
I know, you're right. I know. I just trust your expert opinion. It's one of the things that weighs on my heart heavily. And we're going to work with a lot of different folks to figure it out. And I appreciate you being open to at least a conversation around maybe what your office can do to address that issue. So thank you for that. There's an issue, and you know what? I'm going to save that one for last. Well, yeah. So there's an issue right now in the city with youth. I don't like to use the word gangs, but young people just representing certain cliques. Let's say it that way. And, this is very different than when I was growing up because it's not necessarily drug related, right? Like when I think about a lot of youth-based crime, people fought over like territory, drug corners and things like that. That's not what we're seeing. We're seeing young people still feeling like they represent a certain block or intersection or part of the city and having conflict with people who represent or are part of other blocks or parts of the city. And I heard Councilmember Johnson earlier talking about issues with social media. Talk to us about what you're doing in your office with your team as it relates to these groups of young people who have formed that create these rivals with other parts of the city of Philadelphia.
Sure. So you're describing one of the great tragedies of our time, in my opinion. If you go back a long way, you'll find out people used to kill each other for love, and then they killed each other for drugs, meaning money, and now they're killing each other for respect. There is the biggest increase in gun violence that we see is essentially beefs, often fed by activity on social media. And as I'm sure you know, there is this phenomenon of disinhibition, meaning when people are somehow electronically connected to each other, they'll say the worst things in the world. They will put up phony images of themselves, and people are literally killing other people in their teens because of what they feel was some kind of a disrespect. It's an enormous issue that we have to deal with. What is this office doing specifically? Well, what you're describing, I guess the sociologists would call groups. They're not strictly speaking gangs. They're very geographical. They're often very close in age to each other. They're peers in the neighborhood. That is the unit of gun violence in Philadelphia, which is a little bit different than LA, where it might be the Crips and the Bloods. It's not quite as geographical, or in other cities like that. What do we do? One of the things that we do is within our gun violence task force, we do have, as I mentioned earlier, people who spend a lot of time on social media figuring out what's up. We work closely with PPD, which has people in the DIVIC, in other words, their technology hub, who are engaging in activity of the same nature. Homicide detectives and our homicide with the PPD and our homicide non-fatal shooting unit work closely together all the time on gathering that information for the purpose of investigation and for prosecution. It's incredibly important stuff. So those are some aspects of what we try to do. I think if you look, for example, at the work that was done around 024, this is a case where Gun Violence Task Force does a deep dive investigation with state agents and our lawyers. It results in a bust of about 9 people, if I recall correctly, who were driving gun violence. Vigorous prosecution of those people. You know, we do a lot of that, but in order to do that even better, what we would need, and it's something I haven't talked about, but we need more wiretaps. Wiretaps are an incredibly effective tool to try to get at organizations. It's how the feds do things, but neither PPD nor the DA's office have sufficient resources to really get in on wiretaps. It takes people, it takes training, it takes technology. It's really not that much money. It's just not how things have been done in the state system. It's how things have been done in the federal system. You really want to take down an organization and start listening in on their criminal conversations, and pretty soon you'll know who's in that organization, what they're planning, who did what in the past, and you will really be able to take it down. So that is perhaps a topic for another day, but I see it as one of the frontiers of actually being able to shut down forever Brickyard Mafia, shut down forever 024, Bag Chasers, some of these other groups that are so violent.
Yep. Just so I don't come around for a third round, just two things. How much are those? What a wiretap cost? What is the price for that? And then talk to us about some of the issues that we have with the fake tags, the fake temp tags. That's a huge problem all up and down the East Coast right now, and let us know what's happening to be able to address some of these issues with temp tags. And that'll be it for me, Council President. I promise you I won't be back for this.
No, it's fine. We're going to have to take a break for the stenographer, so we can either take a break, come back, quick break, or have a shorter question and response time and take a larger break.
Council President, I actually want to consult with somebody on the temp tags issue. So if this is an appropriate time for a break, I can do that over the break.
Yeah, now I'm not directing it to you, Mr. DA. I'm talking. I'm just saying we can either either take the quick break for the stenographer and then come back with questions, or we can shorten our question and respond. I see.
Council President, I'm good.
Majority
I'm good with coming on the other side and just hearing about the temp tags and the price for the wire. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Harity. Did you, Mr. DA, did you have any more?
I can wait until after a break. This is second round if you wanted to break. I mean, I just have some follow-up questions.
Let's do this. I want to give the stenographer a break. Let's take a quick 10, 15, and then if there's some additional questions for the DA, we'll come back.
I'd like to start on when we come back. That'd be nice.
All right.
Thank you.
We'll take a quick 10, 15 minutes if it's okay with you, DA.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Come back.
Mr. President, just want to register the fact that I am here, and I'll wait for the next round since I just got here.
All right. Thank you. We'll be back shortly.